Chapter 1801 White Demon Tree. Chapter 1801 White Demon Tree. *TTY dog, are you asking for a beating? Ling Han said with a dark expression. Hehe, judging from your lack of strength, you're definitely suffering from renal deficiency, the large black dog said as he pushed Ling Han's shoulder. He was standing on his hind legs like a human, and he continued in a suggestive voice, take care to nourish yourself. Otherwise, your neighbor adulterer might seize this opportunity to do something untoward. Piss off, Ling Han said as he tried to kick the large black dog aside. However, the large black dog nimbly dodged his kick before saying with a solemn expression, fine, I won't joke around with you anymore. Say, why are you so uptight? This white demon tree can absorb all kinds of auras and ultimately form a murderous aura. If you can refine this aura, your attacks will be imbued with a soaring murderous aura. They'll be incredibly astounding. Moreover, if you're fortunate enough, you might even be able to cultivate the regulation of slaughter from this aura. At that time, you'll possess an overwhelming advantage even if you come across fellow kings among kings. Ling Han was slightly puzzled, and he said, Little Black, you don't seem like a good person at all, so why are you suddenly doing something good? Fuck. It's because you seem decent that I'm giving you this opportunity. If you don't want it, then so be it. The large black dog huffed. Why don't you take it for yourself? Ling Han asked. It had been much the same during their trip through the Han clan's mountain of treasures. They had obtained the 7 lives divine cloud, yet the large black dog hadn't asked for any of it from Ling Han. Now that they had come across the white demon tree, he was acting in a similar fashion again. Thinking even further back, the large black dog had never taken advantage of him even though he would screw him over from time to time. In fact, Ling Han had always gotten the better end of the deals. This was inconsistent with the large black dog's personality. I'm a divine hound of heaven and earth, and I was born powerful and mighty. As such, I don't need help from these external matters, the large black dog said with a haughty expression. Go on, keep boasting, Ling Han said. He naturally didn't believe the large black dog. Perhaps this large black dog was extremely patient and cunning, and it was planning to help him reach a supreme cultivation level, at which time it would snatch his fruits of cultivation. Or perhaps this detestable dog was truly helping him and acting in his best interests. However, did such unconditional love truly exist in the world? You can trust this detestable dog, Small Tower suddenly said. Ling Han was astonished, and he asked, how do you know? It can't be that you were already acquainted with him since long ago, right? This wasn't impossible. After all, the large black dog had been dug out from some ancient site in the celestial realm by Jiyu Dawi during his first lifetime. Even though he had only been a pup at that time, it was hard to say whether the large black dog was in his second lifetime, third lifetime, or even fourth lifetime. As long as their divine sense was powerful enough, Celestials could easily change their physical body. Small Tower pondered for a moment before saying, I still have yet to recover much of my memories. However, I have a feeling that this detestable dog is trustworthy. You guys were definitely acquainted before, Ling Han said with certainty. Otherwise, how could Small Tower have developed such a feeling? Why didn't Small Tower develop such feelings toward other people? Moreover, the large black dog was also extremely helpful and caring of him. Although the large black dog always screwed him over, it was without a doubt that he cared for him like a senior cared for their junior. The Tower of 3 Realms and the large black dog. Just what kind of relationship did they have in the past? Ling Han didn't question Small Tower anymore. Regardless of whether it was Small Tower or the large black dog, both of them had large gaps in their memories. Even if they didn't, they were still unwilling to go into great detail about this topic. Thus, it was useless to press them any further. Let's go and get the tree heart, Ling Han said with a chuckle. Demonized tree heart. The large black dog stressed. The 3 people walked into the village. In fact, even the tallest walls here could only reach their knees. As such, their vision wasn't obstructed at all, and it was as if the white demon tree was resting right before them. Anyhow, apart from its shape, this white demon tree didn't seem like a tree at all. There were numerous human faces on the trunk of the tree, and this sight was as hair-raising and harrowing as could be. "Something's not right," the large black dog exclaimed and suddenly stopped. He carefully observed the white demon tree. "What's wrong?" Ling Han asked and halted. He immediately held the Empress back. He also found the white demon tree extremely uncanny and strange, especially the numerous faces on its trunk. "Something's very wrong." The large black dog shook his head and said, "In fact, everything here seems a little off." "White demon tree," someone behind them suddenly exclaimed in astonishment. They then hurriedly dashed over, completely ignoring the presence of Ling Han and the others. They resolutely charged toward the white demon tree. If the other party hadn't been so arrogant and frantic, Ling Han would have called out in warning. However, since the former was so intent on snatching the treasure, why did Ling Han need to warn him of any potential dangers? Meanwhile, the large black dog was even more evil, saying, just at the right time, "We can use this ugly fool to probe the white demon tree and see what's wrong with it." This was a man of around 30 years old in appearance. At this moment, he had already drawn his broadsword and hacked at the white demon tree. In any case, only the tree heart was useful, and the man had simply hacked his broadsword at the root of the tree. As such, he wouldn't damage the tree heart by accident. Moreover, he had also noticed that something was off with the white demon tree, so he appeared much more careful than just then. Although he hadn't used his full power, the might of his hack was still fairly immense. A glow of regulations appeared on the blade of the broadsword, and it was as if it were unleashing the fury of the heavens. At this moment, an uncanny sight suddenly appeared. As if it were alive, the trunk of the tree surprisingly split apart and furiously released a burst of green mist, completely enveloping the man. When the green mist disappeared, the man was already completely trapped. The green mist had transformed into a sticky liquid, and not only was it incredibly sticky, but it was also extremely tough. The man wasn't able to break free from it no matter what he did. His face was green with fright. It was also at this moment that he discovered that the sticky liquid possessed a powerful toxin that was coursing through his body, and causing him to become weaker and weaker. "Shatter!" he roared as he unleashed his origin power protective barrier, and furiously resisted the invasion of the poisonous sticky liquid. However, his protective barrier was barely effective, and it looked as if it were about to collapse at any moment. Meanwhile, a vine suddenly shot out from the trunk of the white demon tree, and it wrapped around the man like a tongue and pulled him toward the tree. "Save me!" the man shouted as he looked toward Ling Han and the Empress. When he saw the Empress, he couldn't help but feel stunned by her breathtaking beauty. In fact, he even forgot to shout for help for a brief moment. The Empress had already reverted to her original appearance, so it was only natural that her beauty was astounding and irresistible. How could one not be attracted by her stunning beauty? Ling Han chuckled as he lunged toward the white demon tree, with his 9 heavens flame transforming into a divine sword as he did so. He wasn't charging over to specifically save the man, but rather couldn't be bothered to wait any longer. Boom! As the flaming sword slashed over, the white demon tree immediately released another burst of green mist toward Ling Han. "Shatter!" Ling Han shouted as he swung his sword. This was also a slashing attack, yet Ling Han's attack was evidently different from the man's. As his flaming blade soared over, the green mist was instantly reduced to ashes. Just how devastating was the 9 heavens flame? Ling Han immediately unleashed another slash. Pu! There was a flash of sword chi, and the tongue that was wrapped around the man was immediately severed. Ling Han unleashed several more strikes, and as flames burst forth, even the green liquid on the man was burnt to a crisp. The man hurriedly crawled up from the ground, and sprinted back wherever he had come from. He had already been scared out of his mind. Meanwhile, Ling Han continued to advance toward the white demon tree. At this moment, the faces on the white demon tree suddenly started to contort, and the trunk of the tree also started to split apart. Pa, 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 pa. Numerous headless corpses collapsed onto the ground. These corpses were filled with countless wounds and holes due to corrosion, yet they surprisingly started to crawl up. This was as eerie as could be. Chapter 1802, Intolerable. Chapter 1802, Intolerable. Ling Han frowned upon seeing this. As expected, "Something's wrong," the large black dog murmured from behind him. He could still consider the green mist attack and tongue attack from before as instinctive actions from wood element beings, yet this sudden release of corroded corpses was definitely not a skill that wood element beings should possess. Perhaps this tree was relying on its green mist to capture prey, which it would then digest in its body. Perhaps these corpses were prey that it hadn't finished digesting yet. Gasp. If that were the case, then these corpses all belonged to people who had entered the mystery realm this time. Pa, 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 pa. At least a dozen or so headless corpses stood up. Their bodies swayed about, and they were radiating with a rotten smell of death that would cause one to vomit. My head. My head. Return my head. The headless corpses released their thoughts, which formed a wave-like ripple. This was extremely strange. Without a mouth, how could one speak? Similarly, without a head, how could one convey their thoughts? As such, how were these headless corpses relaying their thoughts? Since they didn't have heads, they naturally didn't have any eyes, either, yet it was as if all of them had eyes that were staring at Ling Han. As they raised their arms, their flesh fell from their bones until only their skeleton was left. However, there were still scraps of rotten flesh attached to the bones, and they looked as repulsive as could be. After a short pause, these headless corpses then charged toward Ling Han at an incredible speed. I'll send you all to the afterlife, Ling Han said with a cold expression. He launched a punch that was imbued with the soaring power of lightning, causing a sea of lightning to form before him. Shoo, shoo, shoo. However, the headless corpses were extremely agile, and as they jumped, they easily dodged Ling Han's attack. Interesting. Ling Han released a battle cry before wielding an expanse of lightning as if he were the son of lightning. Boom. He finally clashed with the headless corpses, yet he was surprisingly sent flying backward like a cannonball. However, the headless corpses were also dealt a heavy blow. After all, the power of lightning was no joke. Crackle. Blinding white lightning arced through the air, and it was as if the headless corpses were performing a jerky dance, with each of their bones shuddering uncontrollably. Ling Han bared his teeth in pain as he picked himself up from the ground. He felt as if all of his bones had been loosened by the devastating clash. As he stood up, he was still a bit dazed, so he couldn't help but stumble a little. Ah! As if suffering unimaginable pain, the faces on the white demon tree released a piercing and contorted cry. Pu. The white demon tree released another burst of green mist that enveloped all of the headless corpses. The arcs of lightning on the headless corpses instantly died down, and after a short moment, they completely vanished. This first exchange ended in a draw. After recovering, the headless corpses immediately launched another wave of attack at Ling Han. Some of them lunged into the air, while others directly charged toward him head-on. Some of them also dashed over from his sides. The headless corpses fully utilized their advantage in numbers. At this moment, a sinister gleam suddenly flashed across the eyes of the man that Ling Han had saved. To everyone's surprise, he suddenly lunged over to attack the Empress. This woman was far too beautiful, and her stunning beauty caused his heart to beat in excitement. Ling Han had saved him, yet he was now attacking the Empress and attempting to kidnap her now that Ling Han was being surrounded by a group of headless corpses. Moreover, he was attacking the Empress from behind. With his 4th Severance cultivation level, he was confident that he could capture her without a hitch. Ah! However, just as lunged forward, he suddenly felt an agonizing pain traveling over from his bottom. He instantly roared in pain, and his voice was as miserable and shrill as could be. He observed the surroundings with his divine sense, only to discover that a large black dog had chomped down on his bottom at some unknown time. Gasp! When did this dog lunge over? You're seeking death. The Empress roared as she hurriedly turned around. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. She wasn't enraged because he was repaying kindness with evil. Rather, she was enraged because such trash actually dared to target and attack her. After all, with her proud and haughty personality, she couldn't care less whom they saved at all. Anyhow, she wouldn't take these matters to heart. However, was she someone whom any random person could violate? She immediately raised her hand. Swoosh! Countless rays of sword light furiously slashed toward the man. The man was completely stunned. This attack was far too terrifying. It was imbued with countless powers of regulations, and it was as if the entire Great Tao were crushing down toward him. He felt as if he were about to be crushed into nothingness. Peng! He was instantly sent flying, transforming into a tiny black dot in the distance. Why has Grandpa Dog also been sent flying? The large black dog's voice traveled over from the distance. He was still biting the man's bottom, so he was naturally sent flying with him as well. Ling Han humphed upon seeing this, and he immediately launched an attack to push the headless corpses aside. At this moment, his entire body was shrouded in lightning. Peng! His legs bent slightly, and he immediately launched himself into the sky. Crackle! Channeling his power of lightning and also using his brute strength, he was able to lunge into the air at an incredibly quick speed. He instantly caught up to the man, and he easily grabbed him before returning to the rundown village. "Spare me," the man stammered. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Even though I saved you, I didn't ask you to repay me or anything. Yet, you actually decided to repay my kindness with evil. This is taking things too far, and it's not something that I can tolerate. I won't kill you, either, but I've decided to rescind my decision to save you." "No. No. No," the man exclaimed in shock. He almost wet his pants in fright. However, Ling Han completely ignored him as he tossed him back to the white demon tree. The white demon tree immediately released a burst of green mist before unleashing a long vine that grabbed the man and pulled him toward the trunk of the tree. There was terror on the man's face. He could naturally guess that all of the headless corpses were people who had been dragged into the trunk of the white demon tree. Afterward, their heads had disappeared, and their power had also been slowly absorbed. In fact, even their corpse would be controlled to do battle. "Save me! Save me! Save me!" the man screamed in despair. Ling Han wore a cold expression, and he was completely unmoving. The Empress was more so wearing an expression of pride and haughtiness. In her eyes, only Ling Han and those who were close to him were worthy of her attention. Others were like nothing more than sand and dust. It mattered little whether they lived or died. "Ah!" The agonized wails of the man instantly halted as he was dragged into the trunk of the white demon tree. "You've inflicted this fate upon yourself," Ling Han said coldly. Had that man truly thought that he was a foolishly benevolent person? The large black dog ran over to the Empress and said, "Can you be softer next time?" Grandpa Dog was almost torn apart. The Empress completely ignored his question. She was incredibly proud and haughty. Because it had captured another prey, the white demon tree didn't launch another wave of attacks at Ling Han. Instead, the headless corpses retreated to its side as if they were protecting it. "The beings here have all developed a powerful ability of slaughter," the large black dog said. "Theoretically speaking, the white demon tree should have only been able to absorb all kinds of violent and chaotic auras. In other words, it should have only been able to threaten cultivators using its murderous aura. Now, however, it was actually swallowing the physical bodies of cultivators, and even using their headless corpses to do battle. This far exceeded his expectations and imagination. The white demon tree started to squirm in a rhythmic manner. After a short while, a new face appeared on its trunk. This face also wore an agonized expression, and it was as if the person had suffered unimaginable torture before their death. Pu. A headless corpse suddenly fell out. It was initially dazed, yet it quickly locked its senses onto Ling Han. "Where's my head?" Chapter 1803, Capturing the Demonic Tree. Chapter 1803, Capturing the Demonic Tree. "This is truly a demonic tree," Ling Han remarked. The Empress nodded in agreement. She was indeed proud and haughty, yet she definitely wouldn't be careless during this kind of critical moment. The headless corpses encircled them again, yet they stopped 60 or so meters away from Ling Han. It was as if this distance was their limit, and they couldn't advance any further. Ling Han chuckled before actively charging toward the monstrosities. "You truly think that I can't deal with you monsters," he said with a humph. He immediately unleashed his cracking light sphere before shouting, "Explode!" Boom! As the headless corpses lunged over, the cracking light sphere had already exploded with a resounding rumble. Lightning arced through the air, and this was an incredibly devastating power. Pa, 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 Pa. The headless corpses were all blasted back, and several of them were directly blasted into smithereens under the overwhelming power of the lightning. Meanwhile, Ling Han stealthily reappeared again. Just then, he had activated the banishing technique to hide in a separate dimension. By doing so, he had avoided the devastating shock waves of his own attack. Indeed, the explosion of the cracking light sphere would even affect him, the wielder. Right now, there were still 7 headless corpses that hadn't been destroyed yet. However, they were all missing either arms or legs, meaning that their battle prowess was much weaker than before. Seeing this, Ling Han immediately charged forward to attack the demonic tree. He was going to take it down in one fell swoop. Whoosh! The remaining headless corpses immediately lunged toward Ling Han to stop him with their bodies. Piss off! Ling Han roared. He unleashed the might of the Shenyan source water, instantly freezing all of the headless corpses. He then launched a furious punch toward them. Crack! The headless corpses were all smashed into broken shards of ice. The faces of the trunk of the white demon tree instantly contorted, and it was as if they were facing some kind of unimaginable terror. Pu, pu, pu. The trunk of the tree split open again, and it spat out numerous additional headless corpses. This time, however, all of the corpses were relatively old. Only their bones remained, and all of their flesh had already disappeared. These skeletons locked onto Ling Han, and even though they didn't have skulls, it still felt as if they were staring at him. More and more of these skeletons fell out from the white demon tree. Fuck. You bloody demonic tree. Do you have a sick hobby of collecting corpses? Ling Han murmured. He couldn't help but feel disgusted by this sight. This white demon tree was like a black hole that could spit out corpse after corpse. In just a short moment, several hundred corpses had already been released from the trunk of the white demon tree. Right now, they were standing around it like guards. The white demon tree raised its leafless branches slightly, and upon receiving this signal, the army of skeletons instantly charged toward Ling Han. Pu, pu, pu. When these skeletons neared Ling Han, they all extended their arms to release bursts of green liquid toward him. With hundreds of skeletons performing this action in unison, this was an incredibly astounding sight. A dizzying smell instantly rushed into Ling Han's nose, causing his entire body to become weak. It was as if he were about to collapse into a heap. Poison. Ling Han immediately channeled his 9 heavens flame. Boom. A barrier of flames instantly materialized around him, vaporizing all of the green liquid, and it turned into black smoke. With a single thought, he immediately activated his flame control technique as well. The flames in the surroundings instantly fell under his control, and he gathered these flames into a blazing fireball with the 9 heavens flame as a medium. 10 beasts technique. Ling Han activated yet another celestial technique. Pa, pa, pa. The flames immediately transformed into 10 immortal beasts. In the past, he had only been capable of summoning 3 immortal beasts. This was due to the limitation of his origin power. Here, however, there were far too many elemental particles of flames in the surroundings, and these were all particles that he could absorb and use. Thus, he was easily able to summon 10 immortal beasts. Moreover, these were all extremely powerful immortal beasts. If it weren't for the limitation of his cultivation level, Ling Han could have summoned immortal beasts that were at the dividing soul tier. Even so, the beasts that he had summoned were already at the peak stage of the 4th severance. Moreover, they were all powerful king tiers. The 10 immortal beasts were blazing with flames as they lunged forward, and these were flames that even dividing soul tier elites had to use their full power to resist. In fact, after reaching this location, even immortal palace tier elites needed to rely on blood dragon armors to resist the power of the chaotic fire particles. It was only because the white demon tree was native to this land that it wasn't targeted by the chaotic fire particles. However, because of Ling Han's manipulation and the appearance of the 10 battle beasts, things had become completely different. Boom, boom, boom. The 10 battle beasts unleashed their formidable might, pushing the skeletons over. As they released their scorching flames, the skeletons were more so incinerated, transforming into ashes. The 10 battle beasts were formidable as they charged forward and obliterated the army of skeletons. Expressions of terror spread across the faces on the trunk of the white demon tree again. However, Ling Han was speechless when he discovered that the demonic tree was slowly sinking into the ground. It was as if it were attempting to stealthily escape. "Can you flee?" Ling Han said with a humph. The 9 heavens flame surged forth, forming a giant net that locked the surrounding heaven and earth. The white demon tree had already developed intelligence, and it was, in fact, quite smart. Upon discovering that it had no path of escape, it resolutely abandoned all thoughts of escape. It then stared at Ling Han and split open its trunk again. Pu, pu, pu. Several things were spat out again. However, it wasn't headless corpses this time. Rather, these were the faces of men and women, all of which were filled with expressions of agony. These faces hovered in the air, and they started to slowly float toward Ling Han. After a brief moment, they suddenly spat a burst of black air in unison, and these bursts of black air transformed into countless swords and spears. There were constructs of regulations, and there were also flashing symbols of the Great Tao. This attack was extremely terrifying. Ling Han's physique was indeed powerful, and it allowed him to easily defend against purely physical attacks. However, it would be weaker against the power of regulations. Thus, even though those at the severing mundane tier couldn't kill Ling Han using brute strength, they would be able to refine him using the power of regulations. Anyhow, this attack naturally couldn't kill Ling Han. However, it would be capable of giving him some minor trouble. At the very least, it would cause him some pain. As such, Ling Han didn't want to face this attack head-on. He extended his arm and activated Tide of the Ages, aiming to age the attack from the white demon tree. This was the power of time, the most powerful regulation under the level of Celestial King tier. It was naturally formidable, and it instantly decomposed the attacks from the swords, spears, and whatever else was flying toward him. It was as if Ling Han were taking a casual stroll as he neared the white demon tree. As he advanced, he also continued to snap his fingers and unleash bursts of sword chi that obliterated the faces in the air. These people had already died, so they were better off returning to the earth. The white demon tree made one final struggle, opening its trunk to unleash a boundless murderous aura. This was a unique type of tree that absorbed all kinds of violent and chaotic auras to grow, so it was only natural that they possessed bursts of extremely concentrated murderous auras inside their bodies. As it radiated outward, the murderous aura transformed into a black skeleton that wielded a giant scythe. The scythe swung down, and Ling Han could feel a tearing pain on his skin even before the blade of the scythe reached him. He humphed softly, and he immediately activated his water element source power as he unleashed a punch. Pa! The entire white demon tree was frozen in place. With a wave of his hand, Ling Han immediately absorbed the white demon tree into the black tower. Done and dusted. Hand the white demon tree over, a cold voice suddenly shouted. Ling Han looked over, only to see a man dashing over from the distance. His expression was incredibly domineering and haughty. This man was extremely young, and his appearance was also very handsome. However, Ling Han didn't recognize him at all. For what reason? Ling Han asked calmly. If you don't, you'll die, the young man said in an ice-cold voice. This was a mystery realm, so it was extremely natural for people to die here. Anyhow, there would be no ill consequences as long as one killed all of the witnesses. Of course, people wouldn't dare to kill successors of Celestial King tier forces such as Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng even if they had the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, that would be taking an extraordinary risk. If the Celestial King tier forces couldn't find the culprit, they might simply kill everyone who was related to the case, trying to reason with a Celestial King tier force. That would be far too foolish and naive. However, there were only 2 successors of Celestial King tier forces inside this mystery realm. Moreover, Ling Han clearly wasn't one of them. Chapter 1804, Paper Human. Chapter 1804, Paper Human. I don't believe you, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. The young man snickered, and said, I'm Nangong Ting, the holy son of the lunar sect. He was telling Ling Han to consider the consequences of becoming enemies with him. Ling Han smiled, and said, Isn't Bei Xianming the holy son of the lunar sect? That trash. Nangong Ting scoffed. His expression was filled with disdain, and he said with a frown, enough with the nonsense. Hurry up and hand the white demon tree over. He had set his eyes on the demonic tree since a long time ago. However, the previous time that he had come, he hadn't had any confidence in defeating it at all. This time was different. Firstly, he had already advanced from the third severance to the fourth severance, meaning that his battle prowess had increased by several times. Secondly, he had borrowed a treasure that would allow him to suppress the white demon tree. He had initially been brimming with confidence, and he had believed that apart from kings among kings such as Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng, no one else could defeat and obtain the demonic tree. However, upon arriving, he discovered that the demonic tree had already been taken by someone else. Even though he hadn't met all of the holy sons, holy daughters, and successors of the three-star forces, he possessed all of their general information. As such, he knew that Ling Han wasn't one of them. Thus, even though he was slightly apprehensive of Ling Han, he was confident that he could definitely deal with him. However, since Ling Han was relatively strong, he didn't attack straight away. He didn't want to waste his time and energy on Ling Han. If he could resolve this with words, why would he choose to battle instead? Ling Han chuckled, and said, "In my eyes, you're no better than Bei Xianming. Impudence! You actually dare to compare me to that trash?" Nangong Ting shouted in rage. That trash had actually been defeated by someone at the same cultivation level as him. At the same time, his marriage with the Fu clan had also seemingly fallen through. As such, Nangong Ting viewed him with utter contempt and disdain. How was such trash worthy of being a fellow holy son? Are you intent on seeking death? Nangong Ting asked with a sneer. He slowly pushed his palm upward. Boom! A wisp of flames burst to life in his palm before quickly growing into a large fireball that was pulsating with symbols of the Great Tao. Don't you know that I'm a fire element cultivator? If we fight here, my battle prowess will increase by at least twofold, he said in a haughty voice. However, the battle prowess of others won't increase by a single bit. Instead, their battle prowess will be suppressed. Are you sure you want to fight with me? The Empress stepped forward and said in a cold voice, "Piss off." Nangong Ting was infuriated. This woman actually dared to tell him to piss off. Just how audacious was she? He was just about to scold the Empress, yet upon glancing at her, his words instantly became stuck in his throat. Titi this. How can such a stunningly beautiful woman exist in the world? He had seen bewitching Maiden Ru before, and he had been astonished by her breathtaking beauty at the time. He had viewed her as the most beautiful and most charming woman in the entire world, and he had thought that her beauty couldn't possibly be surpassed. However, the heavens always performed miracles, and an even more beautiful and noble woman had now appeared before him. Her beauty was such that one would want to bow down and kowtow to her. Ha ha ha. He suddenly burst into laughter, and killing intent wantonly radiated from his body. He hadn't wanted to fight with Ling Han just then, and he had simply wanted to take the white demon tree from him. After all, Ling Han was definitely a powerful cultivator. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to defeat and obtain the demonic tree. Thus, it was best that they could resolve things peacefully. Now, however, he had changed his mind. He wanted this woman. He definitely had to obtain this woman. Ling Han saw the greed in his eyes. This was an expression of extreme lust. He involuntarily shook his head. This person was seeking death. Die! Nangong Ting roared as he unleashed the fireball from his palm. He would kill Ling Han and then capture the Empress. As for the large black dog, Nangong Ting completely ignored his presence. Ling Han also raised his hand toward the sky. Boom! Flames burst to life in his palm, and a fireball similarly formed in his hand. This fireball was twice the size of the one that Nangong Ting had summoned. Nangong Ting's eyes widened with shock and disbelief. You can summon more fire particles than me? With a gentle push, the fireball in Ling Han's hands burst forward. Boom! The two fireballs collided, instantly sending wisps of flames into the surroundings. This was a violent collision, and after a brief moment, Nangong Ting's fireball suddenly started to collapse. It transformed into hundreds of shards that flew into the surroundings. Meanwhile, Only 1/3 of Ling Han's larger fireball had been consumed as it continued to hurtle toward Nan Gongting. Nan Gongting's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly jumped aside to avoid being struck head-on by the fireball. He was indeed powerful, and he managed to just barely dodge Ling Han's fireball. However, dodging the first attack didn't mean that he could dodge all of the subsequent attacks. Right after landing, his entire body immediately curled up in pain. At the same time, he howled in wretched pain. Just then, the large black dog had already teleported over to wait for him. *TTY brat, you dare to underestimate Grandpa Dog, the large black dog said in a smug voice as he loosened his bite. With a crunch, he immediately snapped his jaws down again. *TTY dog, let go. Nan Gongting roared in fury. Boom. Flames burst from his body, and symbols of the Great Tao started to pulsate around him. Being the holy son of a sect, he was naturally extremely powerful and talented. These flames were immensely destructive and terrifying, so much so that the large black dog had no option but to let go. Activating a teleportation technique, he immediately returned to Ling Han's side. Nan Gongting's face was twisted in anger and agony. In his mind, everything should have gone smoothly and easily. He should have killed Ling Han with ease before capturing that stunningly beautiful woman. Now, however, he hadn't obtained anything at all. Instead, he had been bitten by a rabid dog. You people have successfully enraged me, he said in a cold voice. He retrieved a pouch and took something out from it. This was actually a paper human. Ling Han had initially thought that Nan Gongting was going to retrieve some incredible treasure, yet he had simply retrieved a paper human. Was this his trump card? Me. A pained expression flashed across Nan Gongting's face. This was a treasure that he had borrowed from an elite in his sect. It was a consumable treasure, and it could only be used a limited number of times. He had initially planned to use it during more crucial times, yet for the sake of the White Demon Tree, he was willing to use it right here and right now. In fact, he had initially planned to use the paper human to suppress the White Demon Tree anyway. Upon tossing the paper human into the air, rays of brilliant light instantly burst forth from it. The paper human then started to expand, eventually transforming into a normal-sized person. Its upper body was covered in symbols of the Great Tao, and each symbol was as profound as could be. These were symbols that one could lose themselves in. Kill him. Nan Gongting commanded as he pointed at Ling Han. The paper human immediately locked its gaze onto Ling Han. With a flash, it then instantly charged toward him. This paper human was extremely powerful. Ling Han launched a fist at the nearing paper human, yet he was immediately sent flying backward, with several bloody gashes appearing on his skin. Pseudo-dividing soul tear, the large black dog exclaimed. Little Han, be careful. The paper human was extremely quick as it pursued Ling Han, and as it raised its right hand, the symbols of the Great Tao transformed into a spear that viciously stabbed down. Ling Han's fighting spirit involuntarily soared. What did it matter that his opponent was a pseudo-dividing soul tier elite? He activated his lightning flash as he started to exchange strikes with the paper human. Peng, 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 peng. The paper human was extremely nimble, and it was able to block Ling Han's attacks regardless of how quickly he launched them. In fact, it was even able to occasionally counterattack. Moreover, its battle prowess was superior to Ling Han's, so each of its attacks was able to wound him slightly. Pseudo-dividing soul tier. This meant that the paper human already possessed a portion of the battle prowess of ordinary dividing soul tier elites. In reality, cultivators couldn't reach such a level. They would either be at the peak stage of the fourth severance, or they would be at the dividing soul tier. However, created treasures and tools could reach such a level. The paper human unleashed its full might. Its power was such that it wouldn't trigger a backlash from the violent aura of the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. At the same time, however, it could easily crush all of the severing mundane tier cultivators in the Mystery Realm. In some sense, it could be viewed as an invincible opponent. Chapter 1805 How lofty is your goal? Chapter 1805 How lofty is your goal? How would Ling Han deal with this formidable paper human? He had no other plans at this moment, and he simply yearned to exchange blows with this paper human. This was because battling against a powerful opponent could aid him in comprehending the great Tao. After all, this immense pressure would force him to unleash his potential. Moreover, very few people could cause him to feel pain anymore. Ling Han's fighting spirit was raging, and he freely unleashed all kinds of celestial techniques. Apart from the Shenyan source water and the Nine Heavens flame, he unleashed all of his other techniques. In terms of genuine strength alone, he was naturally no match for a pseudo-dividing soul tier elite. However, his physique was far too powerful, so much so that he was essentially undying. As such, what did it matter if he were wounded? He would simply regroup and launch into battle again. Are you a freak? Nangong Ting turned pale upon seeing this. Even if his opponent were a holy son or a holy daughter from a celestial king tier force, he was absolutely certain that they couldn't be any more freakish than Ling Han. Gasp! Who in the world is this person? However, a pseudo-dividing soul tier elite was a pseudo-dividing soul tier, after all. The paper human was incredibly quick, and it had already launched countless attacks in the blink of an eye. Even though Ling Han's recovery ability was freakish, it was still unable to keep up with the rate at which he was getting wounded. Thus, his wounds became more and more severe. Nangong Ting breathed a sigh of relief. By the looks of it, Ling Han was finally on the verge of being defeated. However, Nangong Ting was feeling extremely pained. He hadn't imagined that it would take so long to defeat Ling Han. This would consume a huge amount of the paper human's energy, and would thus leave a question mark on how many more times it could be used. In any case, he could at least obtain the white demon tree as well as a breathtakingly beautiful and charming woman. This was definitely worth it. Ling Han's wounds became increasingly severe. Not only was his flesh bloody and mangled, but even his bones could now be seen. Fortunately, his godly bones were extremely sturdy, so they still hadn't been broken. He was extremely satisfied, and he said, "Enough with the fun and games." Nangong Ting sneered upon hearing this. "You want to end the battle just like that? Do you even have a choice?" With a single thought, Ling Han immediately summoned 10 flaming battle beasts that lunged toward Nangong Ting. Meanwhile, he continued to battle against the paper human. Nangong Ting cursed in his mind, and hurriedly unleashed a celestial technique to block the 10 battle beasts. However, although these battle beasts weren't formed from source power, they were still incredibly powerful thanks to the profoundly high-level fire particles in the surroundings. Each of them could rival the battle prowess of a king tier at the peak stage of the fourth severance, so each of them was more than powerful enough to rival Nangong Ting. With 10 of them present, how could Nangong Ting not be terrified? In just a few exchanges, Nangong Ting was already riddled with wounds, and he looked just as miserable as Ling Han was. At this moment, Ling Han circulated a drop of indestructible true fluid, fully healing his wounds. He then finally unleashed his trump cards in the Shenyan source water and Nine Heavens flame. Otherwise, he wouldn't be powerful enough to dispose of the paper human. With these 2 source powers unleashed, his situation instantly took a turn for the better. However, he was still at a slight disadvantage. Upon seeing this, Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The gulf between severing mundane tier cultivators and dividing soul tier elites was truly far too great. Moreover, the paper human was only a pseudo-dividing soul tier elite. However, Ling Han should have considered the fact that he was only at the second severance, yet he was already able to battle against a pseudo-dividing soul tier elite for so long. This was simply unfathomable. Meanwhile, Nangong Ting was already starting to show signs of collapse. He was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, and although he was a king tier, he would still be at a disadvantage even if he came across just a single battle beast. Thus, how could he rival 10 of them? Moreover, these were battle beasts that had been summoned by a celestial technique, meaning that they were undying and unafraid of being wounded. As such, he couldn't even threaten them with mutual destruction. The flame control technique and the 10 beasts technique, these were 2 celestial king tier techniques. Combined with the unique environment of this mystery realm, they had now formed this incredibly powerful battle prowess. Nangong Ting had no option but to command the paper human to rush over and protect him. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed by the 10 battle beasts. Ling Han naturally wouldn't allow this to happen. Relying on his powerful attacks, he forcefully prevented the paper human from rushing over to help Nangong Ting. Pu. He violently spat a mouthful of blood. It was far too difficult to battle against a pseudo-dividing soul-tier elite head-on. After all, its battle prowess could probably rival that of kings among kings at the peak stage of the Fourth Severance. Right now, he was 2 entire minor levels weaker, so how could he not spit blood? In fact, it was thanks to his insane physique that he was able to battle against it until now. If it had been Luo Changfeng or Zihei Bingyun, perhaps they would have already become a corpse by now. When Ling Han spat his 13th mouthful of blood, the paper human suddenly ground to a halt, stopping all of its attacks. Nangong Ting had already been brutally killed by the 10 battle beasts. The paper human faltered for a moment before suddenly turning around and sprinting toward the entrance of the mystery realm. Its speed was as quick as lightning. Without a master, it was naturally returning to its owner. However, this mystery realm was heaven knew how far away from the lunar sect, so it was hard to say whether the paper human had enough remaining energy to return. Anyhow, this wasn't something for Ling Han to worry about. After all, he would head to the Western Celestial Realm after leaving the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Would the lunar sect pursue him through the boundless seas to exact revenge? He retrieved a spatial ring from Nangong Ting's corpse. As he was the holy son of a 3-star sect, Nangong Ting's wealth was naturally quite remarkable. A satisfied smile spread across Ling Han's face. Killing enemies and snatching their wealth was indeed the quickest way to gain riches. Thus, it was best for others not to provoke him. Otherwise, Nangong Ting's today would be their tomorrow. Ling Han removed the tree heart of the white demon tree. It was a semi-transparent fist-sized crystal, and one could see mist-like matter swirling around on the inside. That was the most concentrated of murderous auras. After refining it, he could use it to comprehend the regulation of slaughter. The Empress stated that she didn't need this matter. Her path wasn't that of slaughter, so this tree heart was completely useless to her. In fact, it might even shake her Dao heart. Indeed, the demonized tree heart was a precious treasure, yet it was also a double-edged sword at the same time. If one weren't careful, they might end up wounding themselves instead. They might also undergo a huge change in personality, and that would be equivalent to becoming a completely different person. Ling Han had full confidence in himself, and he was certain that he wouldn't be affected by the negative emotions of the demonized tree heart. After resting for a while, they continued to venture through the plain. The large black dog suddenly waved at Ling Han, and said, "Brat, come over here." "What crappy idea do you have now?" Ling Han asked in irritation. The large black dog was wearing a solemn expression, and he asked, "Brat, how lofty is your goal? Why have you suddenly become so serious?" "I can barely adjust to this," Ling Han said with a chuckle. "I'm being serious," the large black dog said with an expression of disdain. Ling Han pondered for a moment before answering, "My goal is naturally to become a celestial king." Becoming a celestial king seems like a huge goal, yet in reality, the large black dog stood up on his hind legs and clasped his front paws behind his back with a haughty posture before continuing, "Through the countless epochs, do you know how many celestial kings have appeared in the celestial realm? Don't tell me there are as many celestial kings as dogs." Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Although that's slightly exaggerated, there have definitely been more celestial kings than you can imagine," the large black dog said slowly. "After becoming a celestial king, one can truly break free from the immortal's calamity. Through the countless epochs, Then why are there so few celestial kings now?" Ling Han asked in puzzlement. According to the large black dog, there should have been a huge number of celestial kings in existence. In fact, even one-star cities might have their own celestial king. The large black dog's expression became grave, and he said, "Because they've all died." Ling Han's expression involuntarily darkened. "Just then, you were still saying that there were as many celestial kings as dogs, and that they had already broken free from the immortal's calamity. Now, however, you're telling me that they've all died. Isn't this statement self-conflicting?" "Brat, you haven't understood my meaning," the large black dog said with a shake of his head. "Why have the celestial kings all died? It's because they weren't powerful enough." Ling Han spread his hands, and said, "You're seriously confusing me." Chapter 1806, Fifth Severance. Chapter 1806, Fifth Severance. "The celestial realm isn't as peaceful as you think," the large black dog said solemnly. "So you're saying that there's some kind of profound karmic fate that even celestial kings can't avoid?" Linghan asked. He kind of understood the large black dog's meaning now. The large black dog nodded and said, "This child can be taught. You've finally developed some intelligence." Linghan also became serious, and he asked, "What kind of karmic fate can cause celestial kings to die one after another? Strange. If such a grand battle has occurred, why do so few people in the celestial realm know about it?" "I'm not sure, either," the large black dog replied as he scratched his head. He looked extremely unreliable at this moment. Linghan couldn't help but ask, "Then how have you come to this conclusion?" The large black dog glanced at him in disdain, and said, "Because of my memories, of course. You clearly don't remember this, so what memories are you speaking of?" Linghan retorted, "Are you stupid or something? I've already lost my detailed memories of this matter, yet I can still remember the existence of the profound karmic fate." "What does this mean?" "It means that this karmic fate is of incredible importance," the large black dog explained and shook his head. His face was filled with disdain. Linghan stroked his chin, and asked, "Then how is this related to what you said in the beginning?" "How is it not related?" the large black dog said with a scoff. "If you're not powerful enough, you'll still be cannon fodder even if you've reached the Celestial King tier. The Celestial King tier is divided into 9 heavens, where each heaven is unfathomably more powerful than the last. A first heaven celestial king coming across a second heaven celestial king is equivalent to a severing mundane tier cultivator coming across a dividing soul tier elite. Moreover, if one wants to become a 9th heaven celestial king, they need to reach a level of perfection in all of the previous cultivation levels." Linghan smiled, and said, "Rest assured, I've reached a level of perfection in all of my cultivation levels." He wasn't boasting, as this was the reality. "It's because of your conceited nature that I'm specifically warning you about this," the large black dog said in a haughty voice. "Do you think that severing heaven and earth signify perfection?" Linghan was slightly astonished, and he asked, "This doesn't signify perfection." No. The large black dog shook his head, and said, "My memory tells me that this isn't enough to become a 9th heaven celestial king, a heavenly venerate, or whatnot. Not only do you need to sever heaven and earth, but you even need to reach the 5th severance. 5th severance. Linghan couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment. Was this even possible? The 4th severance was the limit, and one wouldn't be able to sever anything else. Otherwise, they could only sever their own life. This was common knowledge. If one could continue to sever the mundane, then why didn't people reach the 5th severance, the 10th severance, or even the 100th severance? At that time, wouldn't they be able to crush even dividing soul tier elites and immortal palace tier elites? Since the minor tiers were designed as such, there was naturally a good reason behind it. Reaching this level is naturally extremely difficult. In fact, casting one's gaze through past and present, few people have managed to succeed. However, I know that if you want to reach the highest pinnacle of cultivation, you must reach the 5th severance, the large black dog said in a solemn voice. Severing heaven and earth can only allow you to become a king among kings. However, reaching the 5th severance can allow you to become one of the rare few paramounts in the world. However, this is only a possibility. If you don't reach the 5th severance, though, you won't even have the right to entertain this possibility. According to the large black dog, only those who had severed heaven and earth could advance to the celestial king tier. Through the countless epochs, countless prodigies had managed to achieve this even though it was extremely difficult. As such, a large number of celestial kings had come and gone. Linghan gazed at the large black dog, and asked, 5th severance. 5th severance. The large black dog replied with a nod. If you only want to become a celestial king, you can continue to follow your current path. However, if you want to become a 9th heaven celestial king, you have to take a path that's filled with many more obstructions and challenges. Moreover, you have to reach a level of perfection in not only the severing mundane tier, but also in the dividing soul tier, the immortal palace tier, and the ascending origin tier. You have to surpass all of the kings among kings. Only by doing so can you reach the pinnacle or even surpass the pinnacle. Ling Han pondered for a moment before asking, "You mentioned heavenly venerate just then? What heavenly venerate? Did I ever say that?" the large black dog asked with an expression of puzzlement. Did he mention it without knowing? Or is he purposefully acting oblivious? Ling Han still remembered Small Tower referring to the original owner of the Black Tower as a heavenly venerate. Was this a title of respect, or was it some kind of cultivation level? However, neither Small Tower nor the large black dog appeared keen to delve deeper into this topic. Thus, Ling Han didn't push them on it, either. In any case, he would eventually reach this level one day. If he couldn't reach it, what would it matter whether he knew about it or not? "Why are you suddenly telling me about this?" Ling Han asked. "I need to head somewhere soon," the large black dog replied as he gazed into the distance. His gaze was profound, and his expression was extremely solemn. "Where?" Ling Han asked in surprise. By telling him this so suddenly, it was as if the large black dog were making arrangements for after his death. Was he about to go to some incredibly dangerous place? An incredibly dangerous place, the large black dog said in a low voice. There was an air of tragedy and heroism about him. Ling Han frowned, and asked, "What in the world are you planning to do?" In the past, the large black dog recollected his memories for a moment before continuing, "I promised myself that I would steal Celestial King Ling Miao's panties. Now that Grandpa Dog has returned to the celestial realm, it's time for me to act on this promise." When the large black dog finished speaking, his tongue was hanging out, and his eyes were gleaming with excitement. Fuck. Ling Han immediately launched a kick. He had thought that the large black dog was finally becoming serious for once, yet he had been as wrong as could be. "Little Han, don't cross the river and destroy the bridge. Grandpa Dog has finally seen you for what you are, you ungrateful wretch," the large black dog shouted as he dodged Little Han's attacks. Ling Han chuckled coldly in reply. They continued to advance. This plain was astonishingly large, and it was also riddled with all kinds of unknown dangers. In fact, just flipping a rock might release a burst of chaotic aura that would transform into arrows and swords and attack those nearby. To say nothing of Ling Han, who was only at the second severance, even those at the Immortal Palace tier might be killed by these unexpected dangers. Thus, they were all incredibly careful as they ventured forward. They would check the surroundings again and again, even for the simple task of plucking some saintly medicine. At Ling Han and the Empress cultivation, the use of saintly medicines was simply to help them accumulate more origin power. Meanwhile, they could use celestial medicines to aid their comprehension of regulations. However, the effects of saintly medicines were already minimal, and they would need to ingest a huge amount of it to see any tangible benefit. A dozen or so days passed, and they finally managed to exit the vast stretch of plain. They arrived at the foot of a mountain, though this wasn't the volcano that released blood dragon stones. Gazing ahead, that volcano still appeared to be far away in the unreachable distance. It was truly difficult to determine how far away the volcano genuinely was. Anyhow, there was a palace atop the mountain before them. Ling Han had researched the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm before, so he knew that this palace was called Ascending Dragon Palace. Why was this mystery realm called Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm? In fact, this was related to the Ascending Dragon Palace. According to legends, this was one of the few palaces in the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm that hadn't been destroyed. More accurately, it was a structure that had suffered relatively little damage. The Ascending Dragon Palace was most likely a location for examining the disciples of the Celestial King tier force. Moreover, it was for examining those at the Severing Mundane tier. Because the formations were still relatively intact, they could still be triggered by those who entered. If one managed to successfully pass the examination, they would be able to obtain some rewards. In the past, those who had entered the Mystery Realm had occasionally obtained some cultivation techniques. Almost 99% of these had come from the Ascending Dragon Palace. Otherwise, after countless years of plunder, how could there still be any treasures left in the Mystery Realm? When traversing through the plain, everyone's path would have been different. After arriving here, however, everyone would be gathered together once again. This was a location that one had to pass. At the same time, it was also a land of huge opportunities that no one could avoid. Far away in the distance, a large white rabbit nibbled on a carrot as it used its ruby-red eyes to gaze at Ling Han. It then cracked a slight grin, and a sinister expression spread across its wolf face. Chapter 1807 Shameless Sneak Attack. Chapter 1807 Shameless Sneak Attack. People gathered from all different directions, and they started to climb the mountain before them. After reaching this place, even elites at the Immortal Palace tier wouldn't be able to advance without a suit of blood dragon armor. The fire particles here were far too powerful, and they would kill anyone who wasn't wearing blood dragon armor. However, Ling Han was an exception. He possessed the Nine Heavens flame, and he also possessed the flame control technique. Thus, this place didn't pose any danger to him whatsoever. Instead, it was much like a playground. He wasn't wearing a suit of blood dragon armor, yet the others wouldn't be able to see this. Instead, they would think that he was wearing the suit of armor underneath his clothes. If they discovered the truth, however, they would all be transfixed with shock and disbelief. After all, what kind of freak could stand here without wearing a suit of blood dragon armor? Even Immortal Palace tier elites couldn't achieve such a feat. Ling Han, die! Someone roared. Ling Han glanced over, only to see someone charging over with a staff. The symbols on the staff were all glowing, and they were radiating with a formidable aura as the staff smashed down at his head. This person seemed extremely unfamiliar. However, his cultivation was extraordinary, and it was clear that he was a fourth Severance elite. His battle prowess was supreme, and even if he hadn't reached the level of King tier, he was definitely very close to doing so. Anyhow, this person clearly wasn't attacking Ling Han on a whim. Instead, he had been waiting for him for a long time. Not only had he activated the full power of his pseudo-celestial tool, but he had even unleashed a formidable secret technique that formed an image of heaven and earth behind him. The auras of yin and yang circulated through this image. As his staff slammed down, it was as if heaven and earth were about to be obliterated. Perhaps even Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun could only retreat in the face of such a ferocious attack. In their haste, they definitely wouldn't be able to muster enough battle prowess to rival this attack. After all, this was a sneak attack against an unprepared enemy. Ling Han couldn't help but feel slightly infuriated. If his opponent had challenged him head-on, he wouldn't have viewed them in contempt no matter what. In fact, he might even spare them if he won. But a sneak attack. Boom. The person charged over, and his staff arrived before he had even reached Ling Han. The inky black staff smashed toward Ling Han's head, and it was clear that the person yearned to kill Ling Han in a single strike. The Empress humphed coldly, and she was just about to counterattack. However, Ling Han placed a hand on her shoulder, and this dissolved her urge to charge forward. Ling Han slowly looked up. Pa. He caught the iron staff with a single hand. Boom. This was a devastating collision, and a ripple of shock waves shot through Ling Han's body before bursting into the surrounding space. The shock waves were far too powerful, yet thanks to his freakish physique, they weren't able to injure him at all. In fact, the destructive shock waves hadn't been able to enter his body, and they had only rippled across the surface of his skin. There was a deafening rumble, and the area where Ling Han was standing instantly caved in. At the same time, a web of fractures spread into the surroundings. A swirl of violent aura threw dust into the air as it radiated into the distance. The nearby cultivators couldn't help but stop to gaze at the commotion. They raised their brows, and expressions of astonishment spread across their faces. Ling Han had actually blocked that earth-shattering attack head-on. Is he a fucking human? Even Ling Han's assailant was stunned upon seeing this. He definitely hadn't imagined that Ling Han would be so powerful. One had to realize that he had already prepared this strike for an extremely long time. Moreover, he was attacking an unsuspecting target, so he should have been able to crush Ling Han without any doubt. Ling Han humphed before pulling with his hand, causing the iron staff to crash toward him. At the same time, his assailant was forced to stumble over along with his staff. His expression changed drastically, and he frantically shot back in retreat. At this moment, he simply wanted to flee. Trying to escape? Ling Han asked. He unleashed his aura. Boom. This aura was like a tsunami, and it caused the limbs of his assailant to shudder, stopping him in his tracks. Heaven's might. This technique was relatively ineffective against King Tears. However, his assailant hadn't reached such a level yet, so he was naturally affected by the overwhelming Heaven's might. Although he was only affected for a split second, this was already enough for Ling Han. Ling Han dashed over and threw a punch as he did so. Pa! The man's head exploded into bits of broken flesh and brain. This was an extremely brutal and bloody scene. Peng! Ling Han activated his origin power protective barrier, stopping the blood and broken flesh from striking his body. He then swept his cold gaze across the surroundings, with his silent warning easily understood by everyone present. This was the fate for those who dared to target him. Upon catching his gaze, all of the nearby cultivators involuntarily lowered their heads. They didn't dare to make eye contact with him. Even those who were secretly checking out the Empress didn't dare to look at her anymore. This person was far too powerful, and he was also far too merciless. That assailant was from the Chenjiao clan, right? Ling Han, how audacious. You actually dared to kill my subordinate, a young man said with a cold humph as he stepped forward. He was wearing a yellow robe that was decorated with the embroidery of 100 lively beasts, each of which was radiating with a terrifying and vicious might. Ling Han glanced at him and asked, "Can't they be killed?" "My subordinate simply wanted to spar with you," the young man replied. "Yet, you actually killed him with such ruthlessness. You're taking things too far." Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You're calling his sneak attack a request for sparing? Your shamelessness truly knows no bounds." "Oh, that's right, I've forgotten to ask for your name. Come, tell me who you are." Anger flashed across the young man's face, and he said with a humph, "The Chenjiao clan's Chenjiao Yang." "Oh, it's that dogsh *T clan again," Ling Han said in disdain. For some reason, he had an inherent dislike for the name of this clan. He would feel angry every time he heard the mention of it. Woof. The large black dog was extremely displeased upon hearing this, and he immediately lunged over to bite Ling Han. "Brat, your tongue is so toxic." Ling Han dashed aside with a smile and said, "There are good people and bad people, so there are naturally good dogs and bad dogs as well. Don't make a connection with yourself every time I mention something to do with dogs. It's as if you're eager to let others know that you're a scheming and mischievous dog." The large black dog was enraged upon hearing this, and he started to snap his jaws as he chased after Ling Han. Chenjiao Yang's expression darkened. He was one of the potential successors of the Chenjiao clan, and his status was, in fact, even higher than that of Chenjiao Gao. Moreover, he was at the peak stage of the fourth severance, and he could already advance to the dividing soul tier. It was only because he wanted to enter the hidden dragon mystery realm one more time that he had suppressed his urge to advance. "You people actually dare to ignore me? Fuck. You're seeking death." Chenjiao Yang roared as he resolutely launched an attack. Although his subordinate had been insta-killed by Ling Han just then, he was also extremely confident that he could have achieved the same feat. Thus, he was completely unafraid of Ling Han. Of course, being unafraid was one matter, and he was still extremely wary of Ling Han's strength. Right now, he was unleashing this celestial technique with his full power. "Myriad sword technique," he roared as he patted his waist. Countless golden swords instantly shot forth, with each of them measuring 3 feet in length. There were at least 10,000 swords, and each of them was filled with a dense pattern of symbols. Moreover, the swords were arranged in some kind of formation, and they were all able to resonate with each other. Ling Han looked up with an expression of slight interest. He wasn't interested in the celestial technique, but he was rather interested in the treasured swords. They were all composed of 1-star pseudo-divine metal. To him, even 10-star pseudo-divine metal and level 20 godly metal were essentially the same thing. They were nothing more than materials for the divine demon sword to engulf. However, he was still overjoyed to see so much pseudo-divine metal at once. This would be a fruitful harvest. With a flash, the Empress immediately dashed forward. She wasn't a delicate woman who needed the protection of a man. Instead, she was the pitilessly domineering Empress Luan Xing. Young lady, I don't want to hurt you, so hurry up and stand back, Qian Zhaoyang immediately shouted. The Empress was so beautiful that he couldn't bear to attack her. Chapter 1808, Picking Up Trash. Chapter 1808, Picking Up Trash. The Empress completely ignored his shout. In her eyes, Qian Zhaoyang, Luo Changfeng, and the others were no different from ordinary dogs and cats. She wouldn't pay any attention to them at all. She simply needed to crush her enemies. With a phoenix-like shout, she waved her slender hand and struck her palm at Qian Zhaoyang. Anger spread across Qian Zhaoyang's face when he saw this. Although he was attracted by the Empress' beauty, he definitely wouldn't be merciful if they were to do battle. If push came to shove, he would simply hold back a little and only capture her alive. Afterward, he would do unspeakable things to her. He extended a finger. Wang. The 10,000 swords rung in unison before shooting toward the Empress like a shower of meteors. The Empress shuddered as she released her 9 doppelgangers. With another shudder, all of her 10 bodies summoned 10 flaming battle beasts each. She had also learned the flame control technique. Although she didn't have the 9 heavens flame to act as a foundation, the fire particles in the surroundings were still extremely friendly toward her. Thus, she could easily summon 100 battle beasts. 9 deaths heaven art and the 10 beasts technique. This was the combination of 2 powerful celestial techniques. Was this not freakish? Boom. The 100 battle beasts roared in unison, forming a visible sound wave that shook the 10,000 swords. What level was the myriad sword technique at? It was the celestial technique of a 3-star force, so it could only be at the immortal palace tier even if it were a top-notch core technique. That being the case, could it rival the combined power of 2 celestial king tier techniques? It naturally couldn't. The 100 beasts charged toward the 10,000 swords. Meanwhile, the 10 empresses wore expressions of pride and haughtiness as they stood back to watch the result. Peng, peng, peng. The 100 battle beasts unleashed their overwhelming destructive power, clashing with the golden swords and completely obliterating them. They then tossed the scraps onto the ground, with all of the symbols that had once adorned the swords completely destroyed. The swords were reduced to nothing more than ordinary pseudo-divine metal. Although these battle beasts only possessed battle prowess at the peak stage of the 4th severance, and although they hadn't reached the king tier yet, were they not powerful enough to deal with these swords? Ling Han was grinning from ear to ear as he cheerfully retrieved all of the fallen golden swords. These were all nutrients for his divine demon sword. Stop! Qian Zhaoyang roared with a pained expression. Even for a holy son of a 3-star force like him, 1-star pseudo-divine metal was still incredibly rare and valuable. In fact, he had exhausted all of his savings to refine these 10,000 swords. Why hadn't he exchanged his savings for 2-star pseudo-divine metal? Wouldn't that have resulted in more powerful swords? It wasn't that he didn't want to, but it was because he simply couldn't afford it. Qian Zhaoyang charged toward Ling Han in an attempt to prevent him from stealing his swords. However, the Empress immediately dashed over to block his path. Boom! The two of them exchanged a blow, and the Empress was clearly at a disadvantage. This was inevitable. After all, the Empress was only invincible against those 1 minor level above her. Thus, it was quite challenging for her to rival those at the early stage of the 4th severance. Meanwhile, Qian Zhaoyang was a king tier at the peak stage of the 4th severance. If it weren't for her supreme divine fetus, and if it weren't for her 9 doppelgangers absorbing some of the damage, she would have already been defeated long ago. Ling Han didn't rush over to help her. The Empress was also a cultivation prodigy, so such a powerful opponent could give her enough pressure to more quickly advance to the peak stage of the 2nd severance. Once she reached the 3rd severance, the Empress could remain fearless before king tiers at the peak stage of the 4th severance even if she couldn't defeat them. Ling Han joyfully continued to retrieve the golden swords. Since Qian Zhaoyang had unleashed them, he wouldn't need to think about retrieving them anymore. Qian Zhaoyang couldn't endure this any longer. He pointed at the sword formation, and shouted, "Return!" The vast sword formation instantly started to retract. "Freeze!" Ling Han roared. He was going all out to retrieve this pseudo-divine metal. He unleashed his water element source power, instantly causing the surrounding temperature to drop to pit bottom. Even the flying golden swords were frozen, and they were unable to move by even a single inch. It was as if time had also been frozen. In the next instant, however, the golden swords suddenly started to plummet toward the ground. "Ling Han, you dare?" Chen Zhao Yong shouted in a shrill voice. This was all of his savings. Yet, Ling Han was retrieving them as if he were picking up trash. His heart ached in pain. "Little Han, you're even picking up trash? I'm ashamed to be acquainted with you," the large black dog said in disdain. He immediately ran off into the distance. With his detestable nature, how could he be so righteous and just? He had most likely found a target, so he was simply running off to commit some evil. Chen Zhaoyang was beside himself with rage. They were actually referring to his golden swords as trash. They were the true trash. He wanted to stop Ling Han, yet he couldn't break free from the Empress obstruction. Firstly, the Empress was too strong. Secondly, the Empress was breathtakingly beautiful, so how could he steel his heart to wound her? He would always instinctively hold back. Ling Han cheerfully collected all of the golden swords. If he were lucky, the divine demon sword might advance to the stage of level 3 pseudo-divine metal. He smiled at Chen Zhaoyang and said, "Thanks for your generosity. Return my swords." Chen Zhaoyang roared in wild rage. He finally unleashed his trump card, extending his hand and drawing a circular symbol in the air. This symbol was extremely complex, and it radiated with a brilliant glow as it flew toward the Empress. The Empress didn't dare to face this attack head-on. Its destructive power was far too terrifying, and if she came into contact with it, her doppelgangers would definitely be obliterated. Meanwhile, even if her true body could offload some of the damage to her 9 doppelgangers, she would definitely still suffer severe wounds. One definitely couldn't underestimate the holy sons of large sects. Those who enjoyed such a status had all defeated and risen above tens of thousands of other prodigies. They were all freakishly talented and powerful. With a roar, Ling Han activated his lightning flash, and immediately arrived before the Empress. He then clenched his right hand into a fist, and used the Shenyan source water to form a water dragon that coiled around it. With this done, he threw a punch at the overwhelming circular symbol. "You're seeking death," Chen Zhaoyang involuntarily said in his mind. Could his symbol be defeated so easily? This was a symbol that had been carved into his mind by an immortal palace tier elite of his sect. It was because of this that he could channel it. Moreover, the engraving would be consumed each time he activated it, so he needed to replenish it from time to time. However, its might was astounding, and it was almost unparalleled in the severing mundane tier. You're at the second severance, yet you actually want to face this attack head-on? Are you not seeking death? Ling Han's fist whistled over. Peng! Winds howled and clouds rumbled, and the surrounding mountain path was forcefully cracked and fractured. Shards of rock shot through the sky as if they were weightless. Crack! A web of cracks appeared on the circular symbol, and it wasn't long before the symbol crumbled like a piece of brittle pottery. It disintegrated into countless tiny shards that fell to the ground. Pu. Chen Zhaoyang was transfixed with shock and disbelief. Just then, he had still been daydreaming about smashing Ling Han into smithereens with a single strike. Now, however, the result was completely different from his imagination. This was far too incredible. How had Ling Han shattered the regulations of an immortal palace tier elite? Chen Zhaoyang naturally didn't know that the Shenyan source water was at the Celestial King tier. If one had to make a comparison, it was as if a Celestial King had implanted a regulation inside Ling Han's body. Even though the limitation of Ling Han's cultivation level meant that he couldn't fully unleash it, would it not be powerful enough to crush everyone else at the same cultivation level? Trying to rival Ling Han's regulations was an absolute joke. In some sense, even Celestial Kings couldn't rival Ling Han. This was because he possessed 2 types of source powers. Ling Han was brimming with killing intent. At this moment, he was already certain that it was Chen Zhaoyang who had commanded his subordinate to launch a sneak attack on him. Thus, that assailant had only been a tool. Meanwhile, Chen Zhaoyang was the true culprit. Facing this kind of person, He naturally didn't need to show any mercy. He would kill him without hesitation. Chapter 1809, The Battle Beasts Show Their Might. Chapter 1809, The Battle Beasts Show Their Might. Consider yourself lucky. Chen Zhaoyang waved a hand, planning to just walk away. Making a move on Ling Han was because he wished to ask for credit from Zihei Bingyun. By now, who did not know that Ling Han had greatly offended Zihei Bingyun? However, aside from the eyewitnesses that day, different versions of the story were being circulated from the mouths of others. For example, Ling Han harassed Zihei Bingyun, or that Ling Han had uttered crude words to Zihei Bingyun in public. Some had even said that Ling Han had shown something indecent to Zihei Bingyun. In short, whoever killing Ling Han would definitely be able to ask for credit from Zihei Bingyun. With Chen Zhaoyang's status, he did not take this little bit of merit to heart. What was more important was that he could form a connection with a celestial king tier force through this matter. Furthermore, what if Zihei Bingyun fell in love with him? This was not impossible. What was so bad about him, Chen Zhaoyang? At the very least, he was a holy son too. While he was not equal to Luo Changfeng, that was because their overall level was different, leading to a difference in the resources they could access, and not because his own natural talent at cultivation was weak. Thus, the moment he spotted Ling Han, he could not help commanding his subordinate to launch a sudden attack on him. He still wanted some face. As a holy son, how could he possibly personally launch a sneak attack on a target that was weaker than himself? But he had not imagined that not only would his subordinate be killed, he had even lost a precious sword formation. In fact, he had even played his trump card, but it was still unable to suppress Ling Han. This made him feel extremely despondent, and he had lost all fighting spirit. What was the point of continuing the fight? He had best obediently look for other fated opportunities. Ling Han couldn't help but smirk coldly. You think you can still escape? He opened his mouth, and menacingly asked, You want to leave? Have you asked for my permission? Haha. Chen Zhaoyang faltered for a moment, and then broke into laughter in great disdain. I, Chen Zhaoyang, wish to leave, and don't tell me that you will be able to stop me. I'm not interested in stopping you. I only wish to send you on your way, Ling Han stated calmly. Impudence. Chen Zhaoyang rebuked coldly. Who was he? One of the heirs of the Chen Zhao clan. And Ling Han? Some unknown character. In the celestial realm, while natural talent was important, without a noble background, you were still nothing. Otherwise, why would he be so much inferior compared to Luo Changfeng? Ling Han's killing intent blazed. He was going to use Chen Zhaoyang as an example, letting everyone know what kind of price they would have to prepare themselves to pay if they were to make a move on him. Though he was unafraid of strong enemies, he also disliked being ambushed constantly by others. Killing you is like killing a chicken, he declared calmly. It did not mean that killing Chen Zhaoyang was easy, but rather that in Ling Han's eyes, this was merely a cat or dog that he would not think overly much about even if he killed it. He would not even bother remembering his name. Chen Zhaoyang's body trembled in his overwhelming fury, and he felt that Ling Han was really too arrogant. Though he could not kill Ling Han, would Ling Han be able to kill him? And he said that it was like killing a chicken. P2E. I will not lower myself to your level. Chen Zhaoyang decided to ignore Ling Han completely. Once he had left the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, he would go and break through to the Dividing Soul Tier, and once he had advanced into the Dividing Soul Tier, then no matter how freakish Ling Han was, he really would only be like a chicken that was grown for slaughter in front of a Dividing Soul Tier elite. Thus, there was no need to be in a rush now. Moreover, there weren't any existing grudges between himself and Ling Han, right? There was no need for him to waste time on fighting the latter to death here. That will not be up to you to decide. Ling Han charged out, and using the 10 beasts technique, multiple battle beasts of fire appeared, their roars resounding like thunder. At present, he could only use the 10 beasts technique perfectly in this mystery realm. Since that was the case, he naturally had to make good use of the opportunity. Otherwise, after he left, he could only throw out 2.5 battle beasts, and their battle prowess would be far weaker. The 10 battle beasts appeared. This was battle prowess that would practically drive one to despair. In this mystery realm, severing mundane tier was king. 10 battle beasts that were at 4th Severance peak stage, and were king tiers at that, unafraid of death or injury. Who would not be afraid when they saw such a lineup? Even a king among kings like Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun would have to advance into the 4th Severance to be able to suppress them, and if they faced this lineup right now, they definitely would have to flee. Chen Zhao Yang roared in fury, but being ganged up on by 10 battle beasts, he could only bear the barrage with much difficulty. All around them, surprised exclamations sounded. TTT this. Chen Zhao Yang was the heir of the Chen Zhao clan, and a king tier at 4th Severance peak stage at that. But now, he was actually being oppressed by 10 battle beast. It should be known that this was only a secret technique that Ling Han had used. He himself had not made a move yet. Gods, just what kind of monster was this young man? No wonder he was still alive and kicking even after having offended Zihei Bingyun. There was really no one else that had this strength. It was inevitable that some people would begin to make their guesses. Could it be that Ling Han had really harassed Zihei Bingyun? Otherwise, why didn't she recruit this kind of prodigy into the clan to be carefully nurtured? In the future, this might be yet another celestial king. Chen Zhao Yang was extremely tragic. Who asked him to have encountered Ling Han in this mystery realm? Even if his true strength was superior to Ling Han, he was still completely helpless now. In fact, whether he would be able to even keep his life was a question. Those in the area were anxious internally. Some were even marveling at their luck in secret. Thankfully, they had not moved yet, otherwise, they would be in deep trouble. A man that could offend a celestial king tier clan and still be alive, was he someone that minor characters like them could deal with? They had best leave the matter to be resolved by Zihei Bingyun herself. This was not a good way to gain her favor. If they tried, they would only land themselves in disaster, with no hope of reprieve. Of course, there were still others that thought that they were stronger than Chen Zhao Yang, and had more powerful trump cards, and did not think that killing Ling Han was an impossible feat. Ling Han, do not be an intolerable bully. Chen Zhao Yang was already in a precarious situation. These 10 battle beasts were really too fierce, forcing him into dire straits, and what was more damnable about this was that there was nothing that he could do about it. Could it be that he really had to kill himself in a suicide tactic along with one of these battle beasts? Then, he would definitely be nailed on the pillar of shame in future, as the world's greatest idiot. Bully your sister, I'm killing you, Ling Han declared angrily. Only you were allowed to make a move on me, and not the other way around. What kind of logic was that? Chen Zhao Yang showed a cruel expression. If he fought the 10 battle beasts to death, his only end would be dying with grievance. Thus, he had to take a gamble. If he killed Ling Han, the danger would naturally be resolved. As the heir of a 3-star clan, he naturally did not lack decisiveness. His decision made, he immediately released a battle cry, and charged towards Ling Han. Peng! 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 The 10 beasts were still ganging up on him, and forcefully blocked him from advancing further. Every battle beast had strength that was not inferior to his, and what kind of concept was having 10 of them joining forces against him? Chen Zhao Yang was not even qualified to break out of the siege. He roared in fury, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His vitality soared, and his battle prowess actually increased greatly. This was him burning his life force, gaining a temporary increase in battle prowess, but the time he could maintain this increased battle prowess was pitifully short. Peng, he broke out of the siege, and charged towards Ling Han. The 10 battle beasts all launched their offensive, but Chen Zhao Yang did not even bother to parry their blows. Otherwise, if he was detained, he would once again become the focus of their siege. Even life force could not possibly be burnt with just a thought. If he could use a powerful move that would put his life on the line continuously, would it still be considered putting his life on the line? Pu. Chen Zhao Yang threw up blood consecutively, but his figure was still continuously speeding up, pouncing right at Ling Han. He was holding a breath, determined to kill Ling Han. As long as he killed Ling Han, he would be able to resolve this deadly situation. Chapter 1810 A Test of Dao Heart. Chapter 1810 A Test of Dao Heart. Chen Zhao Yang pounced, using what power he had left to unleash his final attack towards Ling Han. This was really his final strike. He had expended too much strength in breaking out of the siege of the 10 battle beasts, and had also sustained severe injuries. This was also the last strike that put his life on the line. If it did not succeed, he would die. The final attack, consisting of all the hope for survival from the heir of a 3-star force, was definitely nothing that could be underestimated. Ling Han was unafraid. "You are already at the end of your line, so would I still be afraid of you?" He pressed down a palm and grabbed out at Chen Zhaoyang. Peng! Chen Zhaoyang's strike arrived, and Ling Han used 2 celestial techniques at the same time. Tide of the Ages continuously corroded Chen Zhaoyang's attack. This was the world's strongest regulation before Celestial King tier. Otherwise, it would not have been coveted by the Ding clan. But because of his cultivation level, it could not completely disperse Chen Zhaoyang's attack. However, Ling Han used the banishing technique again, and the remaining force would not be able to take effect at all. Ling Han grabbed out with one hand, which just happened to be grabbing Chen Zhaoyang's neck. He held him up like he was holding up a chicken. It was really too pitiful for Chen Zhaoyang. Though he was acclaimed as the heir of a 3-star force, because his present injuries were too severe, he did not even have the power to counter. His limbs drooped down weakly as Ling Han held him up by the neck. This strike had not succeeded and he would really be dead. "Ling Han, enough." A cold humph sounded. Chen Zhaotian stepped out. A cold smirk curled up the corners of his lips, while his heart was practically rejoicing in delight. Why was this? Chen Zhaoyang was his competitor, and now he had been defeated publicly by Ling Han like this. Furthermore, he had been utterly humiliated at that. Bringing such a stain on his name, would this guy still be able to bring himself to sit on the position of heir? Even if Chen Zhaoyang cared nothing for his face, and was still unwilling to let go of his status as heir, he would make a report on his side, and no matter what, he was determined to shove Chen Zhaoyang off the position of heir. But to just watch as Chen Zhaoyang was killed by Ling Han? That could not be allowed to happen. By then, the clan would punish him as well, wouldn't they? Watching indifferently as his clansman was humiliated and killed, you did not even say a word. How could this kind of person be allowed to sit in the position of clan leader? Could he be expected to protect the benefits of the clan? Thus, now that he had watched enough of the show, Chen Zhaotian finally spoke up. Ling Han ignored him. To say nothing of Chen Zhaotian, even Fu Gaoyun could not possibly command him. It would have to depend on his present mood. If he was happy, he would give him some face. But if he was not, who cared about you? Crack. Ling Han twisted his hand, and Chen Zhaoyang's neck was forcefully broken. The regulations formed by the 9 heavens flame rushed into Chen Zhaoyang's mind, instantly eliminating the latter's spirit. From this day onwards, Chen Zhaoyang would no longer exist in this world. You. Chen Zhaotian flew into a thunderous fury. He had not expected that Ling Han would really dare to kill the heir of a 3-star clan. This guy knew that he had already offended a Celestial King tier force, and now had completely lost all reservations and wariness. Ling Han looked at him coldly, and said, "What is it? Not satisfied? If you are, then come over. I will teach you how the word satisfied is written." Though Chen Zhaotian's eyes were almost popping out in fury, he did not dare to talk back. Ling Han had killed even Chen Zhaoyang, so what was he worth? Strange, previously, this guy clearly did not possess such powerful strength. Furthermore, he had not seen that he had broken through to another cultivation level either, so why had he suddenly become as powerful as this? Lin Fang, Teng Sen, and the others had all just arrived. Seeing how Ling Han behaved so domineeringly, and how Chen Zhaotian seemed like such a weak bottom, they all clicked their tongues in amazement. Who would have thought that a follower of the Fu clan would be able to force Chen Zhaotian to forget all his temper? They had also thought of killing Ling Han before, but at this moment, every single one of them dismissed this kind of idea. At the very least, Ling Han could not be trifled with in this mystery realm. Ling Han slanted a sideways glance at these people, and headed towards the summit, hand in hand with the Empress. After 2 consecutive battles and killing 2 people, his domineering aura was already embedded in their hearts. Who would dare become his enemy? Some people were secretly thinking, you can just show off as much as possible now, but once we leave the mystery realm, you will expose your true face. A mere severing mundane tear without any kind of noble background, and he still dared act arrogantly? Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the summit, and saw that there was a grand, majestic palace that greeted their sight. It was as black as ink on the outside, with multiple images of dragons inscribed on the outer walls, but it did not give off a solemn and respectful vibe, but rather seemed incredibly evil. In some myths, black dragons represented evil, and were a symbol of destruction. Ascending Dragon Palace. Above the great doors of the palace, the words shone brilliantly, and also possessed a prideful air that could suppress all eternity, leaping on the paper. The palace doors were wide open, but not a single person was inside. Going by logic, Ling Han and the Empress could not possibly be the first batch of people that had come here, so what happened to those who had been here before them? The two of them exchanged a look, and stepped into the doorway. They only felt a completely irresistible force rush towards them, and had no choice but to let go of the hand that they held. Then, with a tremble of their figures, they each entered into a closed-up stone chamber respectively. This seemed to be absolutely normal. This clearly was a test. Ling Han had already made his mental preparations. He guessed that something like a stone figure or iron figure would probably appear, and he would have to fight it. If he won, then he would pass the test. Couldn't they do something new? And just when he was mocking this cliché internally, 3 streaks of shadowy light fused, and then took the form of a human figure. His features were not distinguishable. In any case, he looked human, and he was as tall as 3 meters and more, appearing extremely slender and tall. This figure opened his mouth, and, as if they were just having a casual chat, asked, "Young man, why do you cultivate?" Ling Han gave an ah. This was a little unexpected. He had already prepared himself for a fierce battle. He had not expected such a turn in events. "Why do I cultivate?" Ling Han pondered for a moment, and then replied, "To possess greater strength so I can choose my own path, so I can protect the people around me, and so that I can live with a backbone." This answer conforms with social norms, the shadowy light figure gave his assessment. It is one thing to say it, but is your Dao heart really steady enough to be able to keep to the solitude of cultivation? Ling Han nodded. "Then, I will test your Dao heart. Next, you cannot make a sound. If you do, it means you have failed," the shadowy light figure said. Then, he pointed a finger at Ling Han. Wang, Ling Han only felt a sudden darkness descend on his surroundings. He had lost all his senses. He could not see, hear, or feel anything at all. This was an extremely frightening experience. Living was not much different from being dead. Fortunately, Ling Han had not just had this kind of experience once. He attempted to ignite the 9 heavens flame, but he shockingly uncovered that he had lost his connection with the 9 heavens flame. Could it be that his divine sense had been deceived? Otherwise, there was no way he would not be able to sense the 9 heavens flame. This was the power of his life force. If his divine sense had been deceived, then time would have lost all meaning. One moment could possibly be incredibly long. This was a test of his Dao heart. Would you be able to handle the solitude? Ling Han was silent, and slowly experienced that in this kind of endless coldness where he had lost all his 5 senses. He suddenly realized that comprehending Dao in such circumstances was actually a considerably good experience. The prerequisite, of course, was that he would not be driven crazy by this kind of feeling that was like death. With a firm Dao heart, he would be able to face everything directly. Chapter 1811, Trap. Chapter 1811, Trap. 1 day, 2 days, a year, 2 years, 100 years, 200 years. Ling Han had lost all sense of time, and only felt that he had waited as long as a few thousand or tens of thousands of years in this state, but his Dao heart had not wavered in the slightest. That was because he had discovered something meaningful, increasing his appreciation of the regulations of Dao. He hadn't advanced to the second severance peak stage, right? Then, he would go ahead and continue appreciation of Dao. Before, he had also experienced having lost all his 5 senses, but the 2 experiences were different. At that time, he couldn't enter into the Black Tower, but he could still use all the techniques in his body. This time, however, His divine sense seemed to have been cut off, or was blocked in a specific area inside his mind. But under such conditions, he could put everything else out of mind, and focus on comprehending Tao. However, inevitably, feelings like emptiness and loneliness began to spread, corroding him and testing his Tao heart, and wanting to shake him and drag him into the abyss of darkness. In the cultivation world, this was called karmic hindrance. Everyone would encounter this. The only difference was whether it was stronger or weaker. Under normal conditions, most people could bear it, but in such an extreme situation, it was really, really too difficult. Ling Han guarded his heart and spirit firmly, focusing on comprehending Tao. Who cares what you are or what you do? My heart is inclined towards Tao, and my obsession will not change. It wasn't clear how much time had passed. He only felt as if he had encountered a bottleneck, the ceiling of the maximum limit of regulations. An enlightenment rose up in him. He had reached the second severance peak stage. He had long since reached his limits in the area of origin power, and now his comprehension had also reached that level. Then, next was breaking through. If he did not break through, he would not advance an inch further. Young man, you have passed the text. A voice rang out by Ling Han's ear. Suddenly, the space around him returned to normal, and he had come back to that stone chamber from before. That shadowy light figure stood with his hands clasped behind his back, bearing no expression. Ling Han showed an expression of astonished delight. Originally, he would probably need 100 years to reach the second severance peak stage unless he continued to consume celestial medicines endlessly, increasing his appreciation of regulations. Furthermore, this was still taking into consideration that he had the reincarnation tree, and had 2 source powers of the heaven and earth inside his body. But now, he had actually reached this level with a single step. Still, just how much time had passed? This question had just risen in his heart, and he saw one of the walls of the stone chamber suddenly crack open. A figure rapidly shot out. Shua, sword chi swept out, slashing madly at Ling Han. You mad criminal, die. This was an astonishingly beautiful woman. However, at this moment, her face was covered with grim ice. Who else could it be but Zihei Bingyun? This strike was extremely frightening. As sword chi danced, even great Tao was trembling. Ling Han's brow wrinkled into a frown. This woman had come here as well. What a great coincidence. His killing intent blazed. He really did not have the slightest bit of fondness for Zihei Bingyun. Just to take out her anger, she was willing to commit murder. She had really been horribly spoilt. Did she really think that he didn't dare to kill her? Ling Han's figure leaped out, his hands balling into fists. The 2 great source powers of heaven and earth circulated at the same time. One fist was blazing hot, while the other was icy cold, forming 2 extremities as they blasted towards Zihei Bingyun. Peng! 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 The 2 of them clashed in an exchange of blows. It was clear that Zihei Bingyun had also gained a great benefit in this place, having advanced from the 3rd severance early stage to the 3rd severance peak stage. In terms of battle prowess, she still overwhelmed Ling Han completely. However, due to Ling Han's tough physique, it was still a great problem for her to cause any harm to him. Vile criminal, I want nothing more than to devour your flesh and drink your blood. Zihei Bingyun harshly rebuked even while she was delivering attacks against him. Her beautiful eyes were wide as if she had suffered some great atrocity, and was filled with a boundless fury. Ling Han couldn't help but become speechless. Just who had been the first to trifle with the other? He wanted to toss a harsh rebuke back, but his heart suddenly clenched. How could it be so coincidental? It wasn't anyone else that had come, but had to be Zihei Bingyun. The test given by the shadowy light figure was a test of his Tao heart. He could not make a sound, but what if the so-called pass previously was only just another part of the test? With such thoughts, Ling Han immediately discovered what was off. Though the Shenyin source water and 9 heavens flame were very strong, they did not have that kind of supreme noble air of a source power of heaven and earth. Furthermore, he was still unable to sense the Black Tower. Originally, this should have been the first thing he realized, but he was filled with astonished delight previously, and heard that he had passed, which was followed by Zihei Bingyun charging out. Everything had happened all at once, and he was not given the slightest time to think at all. This was still a part of the test. If anyone was careless and overlooked it, he would definitely fall for the trap. With a discovery like this, it was naturally impossible for Linghan to speak. He only circulated his full power, and launched a powerful offensive against Zihei Bingyun. At this time, he also discovered that though his physique was very strong, it had not reached the extent that it had after having been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. Clearly, there was some mysterious technique that was imitating his condition, but the problem was that whether it was the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, Shenyun Source Water, or Nine Heavens Flame, they were all too high grade. Two were great source powers of heaven and earth, and the other had been created through fusing a considerable number of celestial king tier techniques, so how could they be emulated? It was greatly possible that this had been an ancient celestial king tier sect, but even if this technique had been laid down by a celestial king, how could a mere technique that had been left behind perfectly emulate three great celestial king tier objects with its creator now gone? That would really be a joke. Thus, if he investigated carefully, there were actually many gaps in the matter. Since that was the case, then could I be even stronger? Linghan thought. I am not severing mundane tier, I am dividing soul tier. Boom, he instantly unleashed an incomparably powerful attack. One strike was crushing, and Zihei Bingyun was blasted into smithereens, and turned into spots of light that gradually disappeared. Not bad, not bad. It was still the voice of that shadowy figure from before which rang out by Linghan's ear. The scene in front of his eyes seemed to have changed slightly, but the change had been too fast. If it was not for the fact that Linghan's senses were incredibly sharp, he could not possibly have been able to detect the change. He connected to the Black Tower at the first instant, and when he discovered that he could, he immediately relaxed. This time, he had really passed the test. He sensed the condition of his physical body. The passage of time could be deduced from the minuscule changes in the physical body. It only took an instant, and he immediately showed an expression of surprise. That was because only a few breaths' time had passed. It was only the time for a few breaths, and he had advanced from the second severance middle stage to the second severance peak stage. This was practically a miracle. So this was the power of a celestial king. He had a dawning realization. Rather than calling this a test, it would be more appropriate to call it good luck. When this celestial king tier sect had still existed, this place was definitely not somewhere anyone could come just as they liked. Instead, only core disciples that had gone through careful, meticulous selection would be qualified. This was like taking a sip of reincarnation tea, which was similar to waking up from a slumber 100 lifetimes later. Ascending Dragon Palace, no wonder. This was indeed a place that would help a hidden dragon ascend into the heavens. You have understood. The shadowy light figure nodded. This is indeed a test, but also an opportunity. Whether you are able to grasp it depends on whether your Tao heart is firm or otherwise. However, every person only has an opportunity like this once in a lifetime. Furthermore, it is only limited to the severing mundane tier. Otherwise, the spirit would sustain a fatal injury. It will only be detrimental, and not beneficial at all. Even celestial kings can do nothing. Linghan was curious, and asked, I have survived the solitude, and guarded my Tao heart, so I have gained this good fortune, but if I was not able to pass through the next test? That false Zihei Bingyun was actually the real test, and could also be called a trap. The shadowy light figure did not show emotion, and coldly replied, then you will not be able to enter into a place, and search for another greater opportunity. What opportunity? Linghan asked. Chapter 1812 Encounter. Chapter 1812 Encounter. The shadowy figure did not reply, and merely pointed a finger at Linghan. Linghan felt his vision blur, and the space he was in warped. When everything had stabilized, he had already appeared in a different location. This was a forest of peach trees, and it was not clear how far it extended. At present, the plump blossoms covering the trees were all blooming wildly, creating a carpet of pink. A fragrance wafted in the air, refreshing the heart and spirit. In the celestial realm, all plants would be evolving towards the aspect of size. Typically, they would be giant trees that were several tens of thousands of meters high, and this could only be considered a normal height at that. The real giants were as tall as millions of meters, in fact. But in this place, the size of the peach trees was very normal. They were only about 6 meters tall, and with petals that fell and covered the ground completely, they presented an astonishingly beautiful scene. Ling Han first sensed his own physical state, and confirmed that this was a real location. Then, he strode forwards. He did not have any destination in mind, and was just walking casually. There was no way that he would be able to distinguish directions in this place anyways. After walking for a while, he stopped. He had a feeling that if he continued to walk like this, he would never be able to walk out of here in eternity. The shadowy figure had said that passing the second test, he would be able to gain access to another spot of good fortune. Was this it? Great fortune naturally could not be bestowed on one for nothing. This was a test. Ling Han soared into the skies, and his eyes wandered over his surroundings. However, all he could see was still wide stretches of peach trees. They became a carpet of pink, as if this was a world of peach trees. His eyes lifted slightly. Though the peach trees were grown very closely together, something different had suddenly appeared ahead. One of the peach trees had bent to one side. Initially, everything was uniform and neat, and suddenly there was one that was bent. This would probably drive a person with obsessive-compulsive disorder to death. Ling Han soared over, and with that spot as the center, he soon found another peach tree that had bent in growth. He continued to find these anomalies. His figure soared, but a whole 2 days had passed, and he was still going around in circles in this forest of peach trees that seemed to have no end. Wait, no. Ling Han shook his head. The path to leave, or rather the path towards that location of good fortune, could not possibly be as simple as this. His figure descended, and he sat in a cross-legged position. The path that he had walked previously appeared in his mind. When one had reached the heights that he had, every path he walked would naturally be inscribed in his memory. Immediately, a route map spread out in his mind's eye. The complexity of the route was shocking. There must be a rhythm to it, Ling Han said to himself. He thought for a while, then directly entered into the Black Tower, and began his calculations underneath the reincarnation tree. Only a day later, his eyes snapped open, and he broke into a smile. He was sure that he had found the correct path. Husband. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden walked over. At present, she was the only one left in the Black Tower. Even the bootlicker, the Azura demon emperor, had been tossed by Ling Han at the secondary city of Black Moon City, so she was naturally both bored and peaceful. Ling Han comforted her for a while. It could not be helped. She had not advanced to the severing mundane tier yet, so there was no way that she could walk around in the hidden dragon mystery realm. After exiting the Black Tower, Ling Han strode forwards. He had a card up his sleeve. Yi. After walking for a while, he saw an elegant figure in red ahead of him. The back was incredibly beautiful, and definitely could be considered the most exquisite creation by the gods. Wife, he immediately called out. The Empress stopped, and turned around. A bright smile appeared on her proud, exquisitely beautiful face, instantly causing this forest of peach trees to pale in color. With her perfect beauty there, anything would seem pale in comparison. Ling Han walked over, while the Empress approached him. The two of them embraced, and felt that though they had only been apart for a few days, it was like they had been separated for a lifetime. In a certain sense, it certainly was so. Their divine sense had been cut off through some means, and time had been ignored. They had to focus on comprehending Tao. Ordinarily, they would need millions of years to be able to complete this step. Thus, while it seemed to only be a few breaths' time, to their spirits, it had indeed been as long as a few million years. Just like how they comprehended Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. Though it was said that one day was equivalent to 100 years, their spirits had truly and genuinely passed as long as 100 years. Absence made the heart fonder, and the two of them immediately kissed passionately, wanting to take in that feeling of familiarity from each other. You are not allowed to leave me for as long as this again, the Empress said in a very domineering tone as she raised her head. Ling Han solemnly said, Don't worry. Even if mountains and oceans separate us, even if a few epochs pass, I will definitely find you again. Only then did the Empress bloom into a beautiful smile, indescribably exquisite. The two of them walked on, hand in hand. Speaking of the matter, it was really coincidental. The Empress had not found the path to leave this place, but had rather just happened to be walking in the proximity, and thus Linghan had come upon her. This could only be considered as the two of them having a mental connection. Her comprehension ability might not be inferior to Linghan's, but without the help of the reincarnation tree, how could she compare to him? The two walked further, and not too much time had passed when they saw a woman with a captivating figure appear once more in front of them. Her figure was close to perfection, but when compared to the Empress, they were still completely two different types. The Empress was domineering and noble, and even looking at her back was enough to make one's heart fill with admiration, wanting nothing more than to kneel at her feet and offer their humble worship. But this woman was different. She gave off an incredibly bewitching vibe. Upon taking a step, her flaring hips would gently sway. The arc was clearly not very accentuated, but because her slender waist was really too slender, this kind of arc seemed to be very exaggerated. As she swayed left and right, the fabric covering her shapely hips would tighten, and completely outline one side of her plump bottom. She was incredibly bewitching, causing one's fires of lust to burn immediately. This kind of seductive beauty belonged to the category of utterly bewitching woman who could, with a single look, drive men to thoughts of bed and to spare no costs just to have one night with her. There was no need to see her face, and Linghan immediately thought that this was really a very small world, and everything was so coincidental. Bewitching Maiden Rue. Husband, go. The Empress's eyes immediately lit up. She had long since made her decision. If he could court her, then he would. If he did not manage to, they would just have to kidnap her by force. No matter what, this 9 revolutions charm physique could not be allowed to fall into the hands of another. As for whether bewitching Maiden Rue was willing or not, or what her thoughts were, the Empress did not take it to heart at all. Every living being in the world was a mere ant, and she was the noble and dignified Empress, so what need was there for her to concern herself with them? Brat, go. Small Tower actually leaped on the bandwagon as well. Go your sister, if you guys want to go, just go then. Linghan was determined not to submit. Though beautiful women were pleasing to the eye, if he was to marry them, it was definitely not a case of the more, the merrier. He felt that his affection was already stretched enough over these lovers by his side, so how could he incur more debts of romance? Ahead of them, bewitching Maiden Rue had also sensed their presence. With how sensitive their divine sense was, there was no need for her to see them with her own eyes. A sliver of wariness immediately appeared in her gaze. Linghan and the Empress were too strong, and she could only depend on herself here. If they planned to use force against her, she was definitely in a disadvantageous position. So it is the two of you. Bewitching Maiden Rue smiled beautifully. Even if she was battling, she would still smile delicately and brightly like this. The Purity sect cultivated charm techniques, and even if they died, they were determined to die with a smile. Call me big sister, the Empress demanded in displeasure. Bewitching Maiden Rue couldn't help but feel embarrassed, and her smile became slightly awkward as she said, "This little sister is really." Her eyes swept over the Empress, and her cherry mouth suddenly gaped widely. Added with her delicate, bewitching expression, it would make men think of certain indecent thoughts as they'd wish to shove a certain something into her small mouth, and fill it to the brim. How could there be such an exquisite woman in this world? Chapter 1813, So Many People. Chapter 1813, So Many People. Beautiful women were all conceited. Especially an exquisite seductive beauty like bewitching Maiden Rue, who was confident that none could match her. It was practically a fantasy for her to admit that her beauty was inferior to another woman's. But when she saw the Empress, bewitching Maiden Rue did not have the slightest bit of self-confidence. She could not help but admit that the latter was indeed much more beautiful than she was. It was not being just a slight bit more beautiful than her, but a crushing victory, and she couldn't even find the slightest bit of excuse, like her breasts were not as shapely as hers, her hips not as flaring as hers, or her waist not as slender as hers. Everything of the Empress was perfection itself. Furthermore, her bearing was really too powerful. She was as noble as a divine maiden that others could only admire from afar but dared not to commit sacrilege. Big sister. Bewitching Maiden Rue involuntarily called out, but the moment the words left her mouth, she hurriedly shut her mouth. How could she have compromised? The Empress nodded, and said, "Since you have called me your big sister, you are a member of the Ling clan from now onwards." Hey, you are talking on your own here, right? Bewitching Maiden Rue hurriedly waved a hand in denial, and protested, "Miss. Call big sister," the Empress corrected. Bewitching Maiden Rue couldn't help but become speechless. Even if you are as beautiful as a fairy, you can't be unreasonable. Linghan laughed, and said, excuse me. At first, Bewitching Maiden Rue was very wary about the two of them, and now she was further intimidated by the Empress's exquisite beauty, so she was naturally unwilling to travel with them. When she heard his words, she made the move to step out of their way. Linghan pulled the Empress with him, while the latter complained, "Husband, she is a 9 revolutions charm physique, she cannot be allowed to benefit another." With her domineering attitude, these words were not said softly, but rather loud enough for the Bewitching Maiden Rue to hear them clearly. Bewitching Maiden Rue almost stumbled and fell onto the ground, her pretty face twitching slightly. At this point, she really had no idea what she should say. Linghan only offered a dry laugh in her direction, and pulled the Empress away from him. Rascal. Bewitching Maiden Rue couldn't help but spit out. What does it have to do with me? Linghan felt wronged. He did not have any ideas at all, so why was it he that had become the rascal now? You bewitching maiden, believe it or not, I will smack your behind. This thought flashed through his mind, and he couldn't help but hiss. Unconsciously, he had again been affected by this bewitching maiden's charm techniques. This bewitching Maiden Rue's charm was indeed inferior to the Empress, but it had an imperceptible influence. Every single time he saw her, his self-control would weaken slightly. Demon, she really was a demon. At first, Linghan had wanted to rectify his own name, yet now he had lost the interest to even talk. He simply tugged on the Empress and walked off. Seeing them walk farther and farther away, Bewitching Maiden Rue's heart moved slightly. She had already walked in circles around this place for more than 3 days, but still had not found the way to leave. Though the lifespan of a celestial was unlimited, time could not be wasted for nothing like this, either. Moreover, the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm would be open for around 10 years. By then, that volcano would go back to normal, and this place would turn back into a place that was diffused with killing intent. She instinctively thought that Linghan and the Empress had found the way out. Though she thought that this kind of deduction was a little rash, since she could not find the way out on her own, why shouldn't she follow others? With such thoughts, she followed behind Linghan and the Empress, keeping quite a distance. However, with how wide her divine sense could stretch out, it was definitely impossible for her to lose track of them. Half a day later, a person suddenly walked out from the oblique side. "Yi, Fairy Rue," that person called out in pleasant surprise. This person was Beiyu Xiong. Bewitching Maiden Rue nodded at the other. The aim of the Purity sect was that anything that could be resolved verbally definitely should not be resolved with brute force. However, her feet did not stop moving. If she paused, Linghan and the Empress could possibly walk out of the range of her divine sense. Beiyu Xiong hurriedly followed. Faced with such an exquisite seductive beauty like Bewitching Maiden Rue, there was probably no one that could maintain a heart of stone and become angered. It was really very coincidental. Not long after, they bumped into another person. This time, it was Lin Fang. She had also passed the previous test, and managed to enter into this place, but the more she walked, the more she was unable to find the way out. Now that she had bumped into the others, she immediately felt an enthusiasm that came from meeting old friends in a foreign place, and walked onwards with them. Then, they encountered Chen Zhaotian, as well as Teng Sen. Their numbers became larger and larger. Linghan realized that more and more people were following behind him, but did not deliberately take a wrong turn. He was sure that if this fated opportunity belonged to him, then no one could possibly take it away from him. He was that confident. His mind became clearer and clearer. After walking for a while longer, light suddenly appeared ahead of him, and a peach tree appeared. It was not strange for peach trees to be here, but this one was slightly different because it was growing all by its lonesome. There was not a single peach tree in its surroundings, and this peach tree was extremely old. There was an old hollow that was big enough for one to pass through in the trunk. Just a bit larger, and the whole tree would be broken. Even now, it was only connected by slivers of bark, and one would feel worry just by looking at it. So this is the place. Ling Han was surprised. From the results of his calculations, this should be the finishing line, or where the great fortune was located, but he had not thought that it was another peach tree here. However, this one was clearly different from the norm, which was enough proof that his calculations had been correct. Still, what did this mean? Luo Changfeng held a map in his hands, but this was no ordinary map. There were two blinking spots of light on the map. One was immobile, while the other was moving. The spot of light that was not moving was the destination, while the other spot of light represented his current location. Tens of billions of years ago, Lord Sect Master entered into this place, and discovered the heavenly Tao Source Rock. At first, he had wanted to take it with him, but then he realized that the heavenly Tao Source Rock has already fused into one with the environment of this place, and had thus given up the idea. After so many years, the heavenly Tao Source Rock has already evolved into the heavenly Tao Jade, and this is the time to take it. Lord Sect Master favors me deeply, and has bestowed on me a treasure so that I can follow the clues. This time, the heavenly Tao Jade will definitely become mine. However, the ancestor of the Ziyun clan also entered this place at that time, and a fierce battle even erupted between him and Lord Sect Master for the sake of the divine metal, so he must know that this place contains the heavenly Tao Jade. This kind of treasure does not have much benefit for anyone above dividing soul tier. Thus, Lord Sect Master did not move out personally, but instead sent me alone to enter this place. This is a test for me. Therefore, I must definitely get hold of the heavenly Tao Jade. Luo Changfeng's eyes shone. The heavenly Tao Jade can mend any holes in heavenly Tao, making up for the imperfections before the severing mundane tier, and allow one to become a king among king. And for me, the heavenly Tao Jade can grant me a sliver of a chance to become a fifth severance. Fifth severance, a domain that even Lord Sect Master has not touched. Even Luo Changfeng's hand that was holding the map trembled slightly. Fifth severance was only a myth even among celestial king tier forces. Just looking at the innumerable holy sons and holy daughters, generation after generation, which one of them had actually attained the fifth severance? As far as he knew, not even one. To say nothing of these ordinary holy sons and holy daughters, even among those holy sons and holy daughters that had eventually become celestial kings, none of them had attained fifth severance, either. This was a forbidden domain, and even celestial kings would have to look up at anyone who had attained it. But heavenly Tao Jade could defy nature and change one's fate. He was a king among kings, so he only had to refine the heavenly Tao Jade, and he would be qualified to break through to fifth severance. Though it only meant that he had gained the qualification and increased his chances slightly, and perhaps might have just increased his chances from 0 to 1 in 10,000, but at least a bit of hope could be seen. The only thing I have to worry about is Zihei Bingyun. She must also have come for the heavenly Tao Jade. Luo Changfeng murmured as he continued to study the map. The two spots of light on the map had already overlapped one another. Light suddenly appeared ahead of him, and Luo Changfeng's expression suddenly became incredibly colorful. Fuck, why were there so many people? Chapter 1814, Getting Close. Chapter 1814, Getting Close. Luo Changfeng was gaping with shock, and felt his head ache in a way that could not be described. This peach blossom sealing heavens set, how had you guys managed to make your way out? He had the map that had been passed down by a celestial king, and could trace the clues, but even so, he had still spent some time, but you guys actually walked around randomly, and still arrived earlier than he had. What justice was there left in this world? You guys were even more awesome than a celestial king. If one or two of them had made their way here, that possibly could still be considered luck or a coincidence, but now there were at least a dozen people, so could it still be considered coincidence? Luo Changfeng gaped widely, and felt a bout of dizziness come over him, almost collapsing onto the ground. Shua, the peach blossoms moved, and an exquisite figure appeared. That was Zihe Bingyun. Her expression was no better than Luo Changfeng's. At first, she had been certain and confident in herself, but now her expression had become incredibly colorful. Her little cherry mouth was gaping widely as she looked on in shock. What's going on? What in the world is going on? Bewitching Maiden Ru, Beiyu Xiong, and the others were all discussing spiritedly. This was definitely no ordinary place. A wide open place, and there was only an old peach tree. Added with how the shadowy figure had mentioned that there was a great fortune hidden here, everyone had naturally set their hearts on it. Where was the great opportunity? Was it this peach tree? Luo Changfeng calmed his emotions. Thankfully, the heavenly Dao Jade had not been taken yet, so there was no need to worry. He strode forwards, his domineering aura on full display, causing those people in front of him to involuntarily move out of the way to let him through. Initially, he had just advanced into the third severance, but he had previously gained a great improvement, and had now reached the third severance peak stage. Though he had not broken through to the fourth severance, with his natural talent as a king among kings, he could even defeat a king tier at fourth severance peak stage. In this place, he was invincible. Aside from Zihe Bingyun, who would dare compete with him? There had to be a reason why the two great celestial kings had only sent the two of them. It could be for no other reason than for them to compete with each other. As for the others, they were only their background. Now that he had reached this place, Ling Han was also a little stumped because he had completely no idea where the supposed great opportunity was. Seeing Luo Changfeng walk over, a thought streaked through Ling Han's heart, and he stepped back a little. The former was the holy son of a celestial king tier sect, and 3 celestial kings had fought ferociously in the hidden dragon mystery realm before, competing over the divine metal. Perhaps he had been briefed by the celestial king, and knew how the great opportunity should be obtained. Since Ling Han did not know, he would let the other party do the work. When Luo Changfeng saw this, a cold smirk involuntarily spread across his features. He only thought that Ling Han was intimidated by his aura. This, in his eyes, was absolutely normal. How could a mere king tier be any match for a king among kings? He was an emperor tier. On the other side, Zihe Bingyun was also walking delicately over, her bearing captivating. But Beiyu Xiong, Chen Zhaotian, and the others all involuntarily focused on her behind, an image appearing in their minds. Yen, so fair ********, so rounded. Zihe Bingyun flew into a thunderous rage, and when her eyes passed over Ling Han, her slender hand involuntarily trembled, and a powerful killing intent rose up in her. However, the heavenly Dao Jade was too important. It involved the question of whether she would be able to make a mark in history, and become the only emperor tier that had attained 5th severance in history. Thus, everything else would have to be set aside for now, and taking the heavenly Dao Jade was her top priority. She did not interfere, and allowed Luo Changfeng to do what he would. In any case, it was still quite far from the time to take hold of the heavenly Dao Jade now. Luo Changfeng mustered his full concentration. He was sure that no one would dare disturb him at this moment. Soon, eerie light shone from that hollow in the old peach tree, and stone steps actually appeared. Furthermore, they were not going down, but rather heading upwards into the skies. But when one looked after taking a few steps back, there was clearly no sign of any stone steps in the skies. This was the technique of a celestial king. If severing mundane tiers like them could decipher it, then shouldn't the celestial king find a piece of tofu and kill themselves? Luo Changfeng broke into a grin. This was actually a restriction. If one were to unravel it normally, it would take tens of thousands of years at least, but he had been taught by the celestial king, so this was no big deal for him. His eyes swept over, slightly proud, but when he saw the Empress, his breath involuntarily stopped. Defys, how could there be such an exquisite beauty? Zihe Bingyun rushed over, her expression cold as ice as she icily rebuked, Scram. She did not make a move. Even if she had reached the 3rd severance peak stage, she still did not have the confidence that she could kill Ling Han quickly, and the heavenly Dao Jade was really too important. She definitely did not wish to waste the slightest bit of time. She was the first to jump into that hollow, and walked on that staircase upwards. Her behind is a little too big, affecting aesthetics. Behind her, Ling Han's judgment rang out, causing her to almost stumble and fall. Tolerate. Zihei Bingyun gripped the hilt of her sword. She swore that she would definitely kill Ling Han as soon as she gained the heavenly Dao Jade. This time, she was prepared, and had brought a very deadly weapon with her. There was definitely no one that could match it in the severing mundane tier. Only someone like Luo Changfeng, who similarly had the technique of a celestial king, could become her only powerful rival. Only now did Luo Changfeng regain his senses. Though the empress was so beautiful that his heart throbbed strongly, and he was determined to marry her, he still decisively chose his grand ambition of becoming an emperor tier over a beautiful woman. He gritted his teeth, and entered into the tree hollow. There was only a single heavenly Dao Jade, and if his movements were too slow, it would be gone. Though there was also only one empress, she would not fly away. Ling Han gripped the empress's hand, and followed behind them into the tree hollow. Behind them, bewitching Maiden Ru, Chen Zhaotian, Teng Sen, and the others all entered. All of them added together totaled 14 people. The steps in the tree hollow led up. At the beginning, it was still dark all around them, but very soon it became a white space. Far in the skies, there was a mountain enshrouded in mist, just like a celestial domain. Zihei Bingyun took the lead, and Luo Changfeng followed closely behind. Ling Han and the Empress also used their movement techniques, and it was as if they were flying. Behind them, the others had all lined up into a long file. Not long after, the steps had ended, and they had arrived at that mountain. This mountain was very strange. Its base was unknown because it did not extend all the way downwards, and there were clouds rolling all around, which blocked visibility, and one could not see its clear outline. At this time, both Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun stopped. They had only heard the bare details from the celestial kings. This was the place that contained the heavenly Dao Jade, but as for where the heavenly Dao Jade was exactly, they actually did not know, either. Now that they had reached this place, they were at the same starting line as all the others. What exactly is the great opportunity? Lin Fang asked. She was also a great beauty, but bewitching Maiden Ru, Zihei Bingyun, and the exquisitely beautiful Empress were here, so she did not stand out in the slightest. Everyone shook their heads. They were all extraordinarily talented, and had agile reflexes, so they did not step into the trap, and managed to make their way here. The shadowy figure had said that there was a great opportunity here, so everyone's heart was naturally tempted, but what exactly was this thing? Ling Han was also very curious. At first, he had thought that Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun had really just come upon this place by accident, but when he saw how the two of them were walking around with a sense of familiarity, he had another guess. They had come for the sake of this great opportunity. If it was something that could make the holy son and heiress of two celestial king-tier forces rush over, the value of this great opportunity had to exceed all imagination. Yi, could it be the heavenly Dao Jade? Small Tower suddenly spoke up. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,